Okay, let's play some damn chess. The Spitster. She's cute. Here's another cute, adorable female singer. With spit. Spit, spit, spit. With spit, spit, spit.
Start with the assumption that 14 billion years ago the universe rapidly expanded, creating time and space as it went. Eventually all of that matter coalesced to form stars, galaxies, planets. Eventually we came from stardust, right?
Fuck it.
Wrong. At least the part about starting with that as an assumption. If the universe is expanding and has been getting bigger for a while, then it must have been smaller in the past. That's not an assumption so much as an inescapable inference. Logically, there's no other possible option given the evidence available. And even then, what we call the Big Bang is only a tentative conclusion subject to change as the evidence demands. Astrophysicists explore additional data to extrapolate more details about that, but it's all over my head. My degree is in anthropology, not astronomy, so I couldn't say whether all of that was true or not. Thus, I don't make that assumption myself. I get that cosmic inflation, stellar nucleosynthetics theory, and planetary accretion theory are all well supported, but I neither know nor care how or if any of that began, because it's irrelevant to anything I study. And whatever that answer is, it doesn't change the fact that we are evolving apes, and that all of our various and supposedly holy scriptures are just man-made mythology with no significant truth in them. Not even the existence of God would change either of those facts.
So, we ask people on the street, do you think that it takes faith?
What a dumbass.
Pumpkin J says, while I was a true Christian, and I like how true had the trademark next to it, I thought that I knew what the Bible meant. I read it through the lens of what the most extreme preachers said about it. And that's hard for me to understand, because I hear that kind of argument, but then we read it together. I'm like, this is insidious. This is stupid. This is illogical, irrational. This is inhumane.
Get that damn bishop out of here, slut.
So, I mean, there are parts that are good, arguably. Mostly once you get to the Jesus stuff, there are some good parts of that. But I think overall, what we have to do to understand a book like this goes for both Christians and atheists, is to understand it in its historical context, and that's why the scholarship on this stuff is so important. So we don't need to put ourselves in the mind of believers today.
What a dumbass!
In the mind of the believers who would have written these texts. They're
literally using moral relativism as a defense of the Bible.
Well, no, I'm not trying to defend anything. What I'm saying,
in order to justify these,
I'm not saying we justify
moral relativism, which believers constantly criticize moral relativism as a failing of the unbiblical.
Right. But I'm not personally. I'm not trying to justify these things. What I am trying to do is set up a framework through which we can understand what these texts meant to them back then.
Well, I mean, Lawrence, we're talking about people who didn't know where the sun went at night. None of us none of us in the year 2021 have any expectations about these people being moral savants. We expect them to be barbarous, antiquated sheep fuckers. We're not criticizing them we're not criticizing them through the modern lens. We're not criticizing them at all. We're criticizing people in the modern world, in today's world, with the understanding of moral virtue and compassion for other human beings, believing that these sorts of stories were inspired by the arbiter of morality for the entire universe. That is what is horrifying to us, and that's what we're criticizing, not the stories themselves. The stories themselves, in any other context, like, nobody sits there and reads the Code of Hammurabi and goes, oh, wow, some of this shit's really fucked up. You know, because we don't care. This is from people thousands and thousands of years ago that has no effect on us. But the problem is that there are billions of people in the world today, alive today, who think and believe and act and operate as though these stories provide some amount of moral virtue that we should be following in today's world. But I mean, if we were to actually look at this honestly,
I don't think that they are supposed to provide us today moral virtue.
No one thinks
I know you don't. But these Christians,
that's what we're upset. That's what we're upset about in effect.
The 2 billion people in the world who believe in this book do, and they believe and think and act this way in public, and they run for office on these platforms, and they control world governments.
This book also tells you that believe it and don't question it. This is the word of God. So, this is the way.
Little you can do on a
Come on, you slut.
And it's 15 hours one way coming across the Pacific, even at 600 miles an hour, which sucks. Throughout my youth, I was taught that faith is a virtue. Other than that, no one could tell me exactly what faith is. I was told that faith is loyalty. Fido was a popular dog name because it was based on the...
I'm honored to have the privilege to introduce the Eastern Illinois University R&R.
Fuck it. Oh!
Thank you.
Stupid!
I want to make a comment about the guy
You put for that like a sack of shit.
Homosexuals.
Dumbass.
It surprises me because, you know, if I were gay, would that be an insult? And as I am not gay, can that offend me? Much more impressed I was when I saw the Muslim demonstration at the Global Atheist Convention, where they had all these guys gathered up, you know, telling us all to burn in hell, right? And calling for the heads of people that were in attendance. And yet two gay guys walked up in front of this massive procession and kissed. There's this huge cheer. I was so proud of those boys. Anyway, that takes balls, and you know they both got a pair. When I was invited to come here, I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about until I saw an article in one of your local papers. It was Daily Eastern News. Said I would be speaking on the role of faith in society. So I figured I'd best talk about that. And I'm going to have to read a lot of this. I'm sorry. I really wish I could have, you know, it's surprising what little you can do on a plane. And it's 15 hours one way coming across the Pacific, even at 600 miles an hour, which sucks. Throughout my youth, I was taught that faith is a virtue. Other than that, no one could tell me exactly what faith is. I was told that faith is loyalty. Fido was a popular dog name because it was based on the derivative of the word fidelity, meaning the opposite of infidel. Obviously, they are faithful, and if your spouse is not faithful, then he or she is guilty of infidelity. That's why they're called faithful. And so an infidel is one who does not keep the faith. And I'm told that the virtue here is that a man should stand by his beliefs as if his belief was tied to his very identity, and that he should hold true to that and defend the faith without compromise. That didn't make any sense to me as a child, because I reasoned, what if you had two men with mutually exclusive ideas? What exactly is virtuous if both of them, at least one of them, are wrong, if not both? So what exactly is virtuous about being unable to consider your opponent's position or reconsider your own. How is it, but of course I know people who will continue to believe whatever they want to believe, regardless whether it's really true or not.
Hey, Flanders, heading for church? Well, I thought I could save you a little time.
Ooh, found a new shortcut.
Better. I was working on a flat tax proposal, and I accidentally proved there's no God.
We'll just see about that. Uh-oh. Well, maybe he made a mistake. Nope. It's airtight. Can't let this little doozy get out.
I've actually met people like this, several of them. One grisly example from my youth. Somebody brought missionaries over to talk to me about the Mormons, and they bring over their pamphlets and they're sharing with me what they believe. And I couldn't help laughing through it. I mean, I was 14 years old, and they're telling me the things that they believe in, and it was just, I don't know, whenever you listen to some religious belief that you're not familiar with, you know, it's, oh, you guys believe crazy shit. Unlike, you know, me, I only believe in talking snakes and donkeys. But when I would try to present to the person that brought these people over to talk to me, I said, well, you guys believe all this weird crap. And she said, no, we don't. Well, yeah, we do. It's right here on this pamphlet. They say, we believe. And she grabbed it, crumpled it up, threw it in the trash can, and prevented me from getting to the trash can to deny that that paper said that, and you can't get it out. She knows the paper says that. But inside, she won't admit that the paper says that. I know that other people have done this too. I mean, one guy I know of managed to convince himself that his wife was still faithful, even when all of his friends and family had figured out when and where and with whom she was cheating. He didn't want to believe that, so he refused to acknowledge it, ignored all the signs, saw only what he wanted to see, and preserved his dignity, he thought, for a while, until he realized, of course, he didn't have any dignity for quite a time. And I know this is what religious people do too, but it begs the question, when is it ever wise to believe someone without reservation? I was told that faith is trust. Obviously that didn't work for me either, partly because I had this image on a t-shirt in high school. In this context, I was told that I would not step onto an airplane unless I have faith that it would land safely. But that doesn't make sense because I know the plane exists. I can prove that it does. I know something about the safety ratings for commuting on aircraft, and I know that I can check my sources to find out they should be fairly reliable. But how could I be expected to trust things which can't be verified and which are told to me by people who frankly can't be trusted? I can't trust the teacher or the preacher or even the president, which when I was a boy was Richard Nixon. And maybe that's why I never recognized any authority as being unquestionable, and that includes the people who wrote all the world's religious tomes while claiming divine inspiration from a host of gods who cannot all exist at the same time. Each of my science books said, this is why we think this is how we figured it out, and this is what we still don't know. That I can trust, and it inspires me to contribute. Conversely, religious books claim to already know everything we'll ever need to know, even though they never explained anything, and you're forbidden to question them. Instead, you should believe them without suspicion simply because they said so, even when they've already been proven wrong. This is why the word confidence man describes a criminal swindler. Such people should not be trusted. When is it ever, even when they've already been proven wrong? This is why the word confidence man describes a criminal swindler. Such people should not be trusted. When is it ever, even when they've already been proven wrong? This is why the word confidence man describes a criminal swindler. Such people should not be trusted. When is it ever wise to believe someone without question? At least when you look up the word faith, some dictionaries will describe it as a secure confidence. But those that do also distinguish the colloquial sense from faith as it applies to religion, and that is the context we're talking about. Every dictionary I have yet seen matches everything I've seen from the hymns and sermons of theologians past and present, and even the scriptures of Abrahamic and Hindu religions. Faith is a secure confidence that is not based on evidence. Without evidence, there can be no reason to believe. So then, faith was described as being synonymous with hope. You hope this is true. You hope your authorities know what they're talking about. You hope they're not lying to you, and you hope that your preconceived notions will still turn out to be true, even when they obviously can't be. This sort of unsupported wishful thinking is what it really means to take something on faith. But when is it ever wise to believe someone without reason? But you gotta have faith. If you have faith, anything is possible. Faith can move mountains. Supposedly your faith can even make mountains move all by themselves, so you don't have to do all that tedious shoveling. That's the great thing about faith. It can give one a satisfactory sense of accomplishment without having to find a solution or really do anything at all. In one of many old books of magic, myths, and monsters, there is a legendary character called Jesus, who might have been an actual person, though the story has obviously been heavily embellished. In one of these tales, Jesus said that with even very little faith, you could destroy coastal communities by causing mountains to jump into the sea. He didn't mention the implied tsunami, but that is what would happen. However, while Jesus says that we only need faith as small as a mustard seed, and I want to know what his metric is, what metric he's using, he also implies that our faith must be absolute, because we cannot have doubt. The only way to eliminate doubt of things that can't be tested is you simply don't question it. Don't even think about it. Even though you know it's absurd, just keep telling yourself that miracles can happen if you believe that they will. But you must be absolutely convinced the impossible will happen only if you believe hard enough, or if you make a wish with all your heart. Because there, mutually exclusive contradictions can be ingested together without consideration. Don't think your way out of fantasia. You don't measure faith with a logical brain from a natural world. Search your feelings. You know this to be true. If you circumvent the intellect, you can believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. All you have to do is deny the laws of nature and the rules of logic, and just convince yourself without a doubt.
I'm a goddamn rematch. God.
Don't just say that you believe impossible absurdities. Assert your conviction. Trust in the priesthood and in the doctrine of the infallible fables.
God, fuck it.
And believe them absolutely.
Move, you slut.
Never underestimate the power of pretend. You must make believe.
Damn it.
You have to pretend with all the auto-deceptive delusion you can muster, because there is a lot riding on it.
Holy Ghost.
Religion is a belief system. That means that you are required to believe this and forbidden to believe that. This is how religion differs from free thought. We don't care what you believe. All that matters is why you believe it. Faith doesn't count as a reason. It is indefensible in that regard, which may be why religionists resort to psychological projection, denying their own faults while accusing them in others. It's an old cliche, the pot calling the silverware black. It means accusing someone else of the same faults you too are guilty of. But religious extremists project their own faults onto those who will not share them.
The real question is, why are believers in the one camp, evolution, seeking to impose their faith on the other camp?
But in truth, all I had was blind faith in atheism.
You don't believe in a God. And so your kind of religion is you have no God.
And the evolution theory is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of planet Earth.
It's the old playground game of I'm rubber, you're glue, what bounces off me sticks to you. It's an infantile tactic which I describe as the pot calling the silverware black. It's a sort of psychological spin. How else can you defend an indefensible position? You have to twist everything around. That's why the Bible defines a fool as someone who does not believe completely the outrageous claims of incredulous sources, even without asking for evidence, but every other source in the world defines a fool as someone who does these things. When I went to the Reason rally, I found myself in an energetic discussion with a couple of deeply indoctrinated Christian kids. They were victims of the sort of cerebral bleach peddled by the likes of Ray Comfort and Kent Hovind, and I was not immediately aware of how many cameras had gathered around us. These boys accused me of having faith in evolutionism, but that's not all they did. They expressed an all too common fallacy, aware of how many cameras had gathered around us. These boys accused me of having faith in evolutionism, but that's not all they did. They expressed an all too common fallacy in Abrahamic religions, one which relates to the role of faith in Western society. They accused me of secretly believing in God, but denying his existence so that I would not be accountable for my beloved sins. My point of contention was ill-expressed in that crowd of everyone talking over everyone else, so I'd like to clarify it here. There is this idea, common throughout Christendom, that belief in God is somehow required in order to be good. Statistically, that is obviously not the case, at least according to what I've happened across online. I don't see a lot of Christian compassion or charity represented here. The factions of dominant religion typically have the highest crime rate, with special emphasis on hate crimes. Religious people are more likely to condone the murder or torture of prisoners, where non-religious people are more likely to consider that morally wrong. Yes, we have morals, and we're beginning to feel alone in that. But it gets worse. The most religious countries also have the highest murder rate, and the same is true of the religious areas within this country. The higher the religiosity of a given populace, the higher the murder rate. Similar nations show the opposite tendencies. Where the less religious they are, the more peaceful they are. Here in America, evangelical Christians have the highest divorce rate. They also have the highest rates of teen pregnancy, which isn't surprising, since we believe in teaching abstinence only. I live in Texas, where the abstinence only program has been so successful that we have achieved the country's highest level of repeat teen pregnancy. But it gets even worse. Fundamentalist Christians also have the highest rates of abortion. That's what a colossal failure the programs of the... Alright, so I was talking about 3 things the Bible says that believers wish it didn't say, 3 things it doesn't say that they think it does, and I didn't talk much about what it ought to say, if it were anything like what believers make it out to be. Because believers worship that book. They can't distinguish doctrine from deity. If they think if the Bible is just the myths of men, then God is just the myths of men. There's no independence there. Of course, I understand that even if there was a God, evolution and all that would still be true. And the scriptures of any religion would still be false in whole or in part. And the way they see it, it's a choice between believing in God or believing in man, and they think that somehow science is shifting sand, that the Bible is their rock. I look at it a little bit differently because we don't write rocks. So, you know, the science is what the world says, and we can't duplicate that, but we can tell stories. We can tell whoppers, and that's what all the scriptures are. You know, the scriptures are, you know, that these are the stories of men written from pure imagination. So believers in those scriptures worship the words of men, though they don't realize it, and they can't imagine that God could be real unless the scriptures are his word and not just what they've written to themselves. So if you disprove the Bible or the Quran, somehow you disprove God right along with them. And I often argued with family members and other unquestionable authorities when they say, you know, well, the Bible says, and then they ramble off something that the Bible really doesn't say. And then I have to say, well, no, it doesn't say that. And oh, yes, it does. Okay, show me. Where does it say that? Well, I don't know where it says it, but I know it says it. I know for a fact that's what it says. Don't you love that phrase? Whenever somebody says, I know it for a fact, it means that they don't know it, and it's not a fact either. Because knowledge is demonstrable with measurable accuracy, and a fact is objectively verifiable. The truth is what the facts are. If you can't show it, you don't know it. And there's 2 bumper stickers you can take home from that. So I have to explain to Joe Bob that this is the fun thing about the internet age. We can Google it, you know, and if you know even a portion of the phrase that we're talking about, then we'll know right where it says that, right immediately, right? Unless it doesn't really say that at all, and then we'll know what it does say. And that's when they storm off saying, you can't tell me the Bible doesn't say it, I know what the Bible says. Or they threaten you for disrespecting their authority. But of course they never just go to the computer or whip out their phone like I would to prove it, right? And it's not because they don't know how. It's because they know they're full of shit. And we skeptics are the assholes who won't give you the benefit of the doubt. We won't let you imagine that maybe you're right and you just can't figure out how to prove it. No, we're the dicks who say pictures or it didn't happen. And I love that phrase, because not only is it a demand for evidence, but it's also summarizes Hitchens' razor, that what is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And so if you can't prove that you're right, you're not. So the one thing believers hate more than anything else is the burden of proof. That's why they long for the good old days when they could talk about any unnamed group of explorers or scientists and the inexplicable discoveries they supposedly found, that were reportedly found anyway, although they could never show you that report. Or they'll tell you about the literal, incredible, inexplicable events or paranormal phenomena that happened in front of many witnesses who were all apparently illiterate and didn't have, in the ages before mass media, or they were on the other side of the Iron Curtain, or they were lost in some foreign jungle that you can't afford to get to, so there's no way to verify anything. And when your folks told you stories like this, you couldn't say you didn't believe them, or that maybe they got some of the details wrong. You couldn't even ask for an original citation. How dare you ask Aunt Ethel or Uncle Lenny to verify anything? You had to give them the benefit of the doubt that they got every detail accurate verbatim, or else they'll think you're calling them stupid, or a liar, or both. And that's how religion has lasted so long. But here in the age of information, when they try to feed us that horse shit, the grandkids are already on their cell phones typing with one thumb. Not hardly even glancing at it, because you know, you've seen them do it, right? Because they're that good. And they're already calling out their elders and correcting them before, you know, Uncle Joe Bob's even finished telling his tall tale. That's the collapse of the American family right there. There goes your authority. Because he didn't want to know that what he said was just an urban legend, or that what he said is nothing like what really happened. That's why they want to go back to the good old days, when they could make up whatever alternative facts they needed for the alternative reality of their choice. And you could legally whip any child who didn't obediently swallow whatever bullshit you just served up. And the conversation goes the other way, too. I would tell Grandma about some horrible, atrocious, embarrassingly stupid absurdity that the Bible says, and she'd respond, of course, by saying, "It doesn't say that." But of course, I'd flip open the Bible and I'd just rifle right to that page, right? And I noticed when I first started doing this how quickly the phrase, you know, it doesn't say, that's not what it says, would change to, that's not what it means. Now that they've noticed a pattern, it is a bit different. Because when they say it doesn't say that, and I pull out the Bible, you know, Grandma's already disappeared down the hallway and is, you know, behind the slammed door. And so this is why I never get invited to family reunions.
Stupid!
When I was in Fullerton, talking about what the Bible does and doesn't say, I didn't talk enough about what it ought to say. That it would say, if it really was the divinely inspired
Rematch me, you
of
bitch.
God, because I was always told that God was, you know, God is love and God is ultimate wisdom. And if you read the Word of God, because God wrote it, it's God breathed, right? Every word verbatim.
Ghost.
You know, it's God inspired. It was written through these people.
Because
God can magic up anything He wants, but He has to write a book through
Holy
other people
Ghost.
for whatever reason. He doesn't own a printing press. Think about this for a moment.
Holy Ghost.
You're God. You created the universe. You're all powerful. But for some reason, beyond even your control, you can't show yourself. You can't be detectable in any way at all, by any means whatsoever. So you are effectively imaginary. You can't be a proper father figure and walk amongst your people anymore. And apparently something happened after the Iron Age, because until then, and all through that time, God could walk with us, talk with us, eat with us, turn his head, wave his hand, show his backside, and cheat at wrestling. Jacob, Abraham, Moses, and of course Adam all talked with God, face to face, just like with any other person. But then after that, God turned into a talking cloud and couldn't do any of that human stuff anymore. So that's the sort of God that needs to leave a Bible behind. Because God can't just show up, and give a speech to the United Nations to explain how things really are, with any other authority, any actual authority would do, right? No, he's got to find the most questionable scribes he possibly can to give them a whole bunch of unbelievable fables that we're supposed to follow, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That's another thing your Bible needs too. It can't describe the old and new versions of God at the same time as saying that God is unchanging and eternal. It can't say that Jesus is in a war with Satan and that Jesus sits on the right hand of God, while the Old Testament says that God himself alone created both good and evil, and he says that no one sits beside him, and you can't have any other gods before him. Yet you flip back to Jesus, just says, who puts himself in front of God, saying that the only way to get to God is by him. You can't have these glaring contradictions. So you're the later version of God. You must remain invisible and indistinguishable from a phantasm. You can only talk to one person at a time, and for whatever reason, credible people can't hear you. But crazy people that you never talked to insist you said things you never said. So the only way you can communicate with these people is through this book that you're going to write. And the first reason you're going to write a Bible is because you're basically a deadbeat dad. So you're going to say, well, I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you, but I'm ethereal. I can't be there for you. So I wrote you this really long letter so that you know who I am. And of course we know that if anybody had magical, psionic, or miraculous powers, then people like Gandalf would be able to demonstrate that on demand, just like they can in the movies. And even if science can't explain it, we'd all have to admit that Gandalf actually does what he does, even if we don't know what we'll have to admit it's magic, right? It's like in the movie The Avengers, right? Thor shows up with the hammer. It's magic. I grant it. I can't explain it. It's magic. It's real. We are never at the point where we have to admit that magic is real, because somehow Obi-Wan Kenobi has a higher performance rating than Jesus. Remember, Jesus couldn't heal the people of his own hometown. Why? Because they knew him too well. They knew he was full of shit and they weren't buying it. Because you need to have their faith in order to fool them. Faith is an indispensable element for any faith healer, and let's face it, that's what Jesus was, if there was a Jesus. I think, and rather than say there was no Jesus, I'm going to go the other way and say there were too damn many of them. I mean, Josephus talked about 19 Jesuses, and they did seem to get mixed up a bit. There's some hypotheses now that the Jesus in the Markan Passion narrative is not the same Jesus as the rest of the story. That was one that Josephus personally used and then just got him confused. There's a couple of other Jesuses that got confused into the story too. So we have too many Jesuses for there have been one Jesus. But I'm getting off the point now. If magic was real, it would be demonstrable, even if you didn't believe in it. And the only thing in reality that requires or desires your faith is somebody trying to fool you or sell you something. But you're not that kind of God. You're a real God, not a fraud who demands belief based on faith. And seriously, whether you people believe that you exist at all doesn't really matter. Your Bible will prove itself, so regardless whether anyone believes in you, so you don't need anyone's faith. And I know I say this all the time, but faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have, because it's an assertion of unreasonable conviction that is assumed without reason and defended against all reason, and anybody that's argued with a believer online already knows this. Faith is pretending to know what you don't know and never having to admit when you're wrong. Faith works exactly opposite of science because it's like throwing darts blindfolded and then just drawing a bullseye around wherever it sticks. And where do they get the idea? Bullseye, that phrase, right? Well, obviously it's from cruel, inhumane archers using cattle as target practice. You don't want to encourage that kind of cruelty either, so you're going to have a completely different Bible than the one we have, because the one we have endorses all sorts of animal cruelty, all sorts of inhumanity, as well as every type of logical fallacy. Yeah, you want to be a wiser and more moral God than that. And let's say that you're a deistic sort of God. You may have created the universe, but you didn't magic up all the different species individually, you know. You created systems that would automatically do that once you get it all started. So maybe you're responsible for the Big Bang, but that's it. Not all that other miraculous shit that we know didn't happen anyway. Because we need to talk about this. It's important to note that whether God exists or not is irrelevant. Either way, evolution is still an inescapable fact of population genetics, and all the scriptures are still man-made mythology with no truth in it, meaning that there's not one thing that you can verify is actually true. Not even the existence of God could change either of these things, and believers get really upset when I point that out, because again, it's the burden of proof. If we're going to talk about evolution versus creation, for example, I will present my facts about evolution, the things I can prove to be true. Creationists, your turn. Oh, look, a squirrel! Remember that the Bible describes the earth as a flat disk, divided into 4 quadrants, and covered with a giant crystal dome that has windows in it to let the rain in, because they think that outer space is full of water. They think the sun and the moon are both the same size as each other, that they're both lights, and they're somehow both smaller than the earth and bigger than all the stars. Of course, they don't realize that the sun is a star. This is the way the Bible repeatedly describes the earth. Not only is, according to the Bible, the earth the first thing in the universe and the center of the universe, it is the universe. Because the stars and the planets and the sun and the moon are all contained within the concavity of this firmament, which is described as being like molten glass. It's a solid crystal dome. And because this was all written by primitive, superstitious savages who obviously had no idea what they were talking about. So, you don't even have to be a god to know better than they did, or write a Bible that's better than they could. Because we know that if the Bible that we have had been written by a supreme being, then it wouldn't contain the mistakes that it does. And if it was written by any sort of superior being and intended to be read as a literal history, then the Bible wouldn't say anything that it does. Because most of that wasn't true at all, and none of it was relevant. Seriously, why did we need to know how many shekels we have to pay for a male slave? Everything is in terms of sheep and shekels. This is God's eternal plan. He doesn't realize that currency changes, right? It also says you can sell your children into slavery. But you have to be aware that your daughter will be half price, even though she's expected to please her master differently than your sons are. So is this what they meant when religious people talk about family values? Girls are half price. Hopefully you're not the sort of God who endorses or advocates slavery and misogyny and superstitious savagery and all the other horrible atrocities that the Bible presents as lessons in morality. That's why some of my friends say that the Bible should have a warning on the cover, keep out of reach of children. And some suggested there should be an attribution on the preface, based on true events or something like that, based on true story, which means they took one true fact and blew everything else out of proportion. That would be pretty accurate for a lot of the Bible. Except that it ought to say, based on Greco-Roman, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian mythos. And some people also, the same people, also thought that the words, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, that those words should be changed to once upon a time. And some have suggested that the first page should have a disclaimer that the characters appearing in this work are fictitious. But that's not true of all of them. Some of them are made up out of whole cloth. Some of them are entirely imaginary. But others are merely exaggerated or otherwise misrepresented. And that's why some people suggested that the Bible should clarify which parts are allegorical, metaphorical, or literal. And I'm going to suggest that we not include any parables, because people made up mythology to explain why Venus never ascends higher than the moon in our sky, right? But then as soon as you know it, People think that that story is literally true and that Venus is a fallen angel named Lightbringer, and they think this is a literally true story. So let's not risk that kind of confusion in your following. Let's keep everything as real as possible. And someone suggested that we remove all the inaccuracies in the Bible that we have and then just keep what's left. But if we did that, what we'd have left would be a tract no thicker than a comic book. And people have already tried to do that. Thomas Jefferson, for example, tried to cut out all the bullshit from his Bible, and what he had left was a pamphlet. A creation scientist named Kurt Wise did the same thing. He was Harvard educated. He had a degree in paleontology from Stephen Jay Gould. But he started cutting out the bits of the Bible that his advanced education as an academic proved to be untrue. And what was left of his Bible was so many torn out pieces that it couldn't hold itself together anymore. But rather than throw away his remaining confetti, he threw away his Harvard education instead, choosing to believe the bullshit that he was raised in since he was a child. So let's not have any, when you write your Bible, let's not have any magic spells, giants, witches, wizards, or talking animals in there. Let's at least try to be believable. We know that there are many different versions of the Bible, and that every translation is an interpretation, and that every interpretation is different, leading to thousands of often violently conflicting denominations. And a lot of this could be cleared up if you just paraphrased every verse, just for clarification, especially if you're going to do something really divine, because you're a god. You don't have to whisper script suggestions into the minds of stoned or sleeping or possibly insane scribes.
God,
if you can poof a whole universe out of nothing with a simple incantation spell, let there be, right? You could probably magic up a book, I'm thinking. You could do thousands of copies distributed all over the world out of non-biodegradable material, so they're lasted for thousands of years. You're God, show it. Right? What's up with this faith thing? Remember, the faith is only necessary for shysters trying to fool you or sell you something. We don't want to go there. And I always thought it strange that God could create planets and dinosaurs and everything that humans can't make, but he can't make anything humans can make. He can't make a book, or a box, or a boat, or a building. And that to me proves that God was only ever imaginary. I mean, why would you, as a God, care if people had a tabernacle? Right? I mean, no being worthy of worship wants to be worshipped. You certainly don't, right? So you don't need a church. And if they have your book, they don't need the 10 Commandments beyond that. So they don't need a box to keep the 10 Commandments in. That would inevitably be lost forever anyway. You'd think God would be able to see advanced into these things. And you're never going to flood the world to cover up your mistakes. Even though you're not an infallible being, nobody in this room is actually infallible, but we are smarter than that, right? So you're already smarter than God. And if you wanted to kill everyone and start over again, which you wouldn't do because you're smarter than God, then you can just make the people that you want dead disappear. Bambi doesn't have to buy it because of something Ahmed did. That would be the more intelligent way of doing this. But you can just wish these people off into the cornfield, right? Because that's the God I'm afraid of. That's the one I don't want to go to heaven to meet. The one where he reads your mind all the time and you better be thinking nice things. That's a good thing you did that, little Johnny. Oh boy, that was a very good thing. But because you're not a horrible, stupid monster like that, the whole flood myth thing is not going to happen anyway. So they don't need an ark either. All you need is a book. And you can make that yourself. And there's something else you can do. Because you're going to explain the formation of species and the origin of the universe, and this is all complicated stuff. And really everything that you want to explain to your people is going to be beyond their comprehension if you put it out in technical terms. So, and you know that the way that languages change, and the way idioms change and everything, you got to be very careful about how it's phrased. So don't just paraphrase it, repeating every verse again in the same language. Have every Bible written in 4 different languages. Complete. And
Come on, you
this way,
slat-out slut.
let me see. You would have this book written in, because you want to still give this book to ancient cultures, say around the 2nd century BC, right? So have your Bible written in Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs and ancient Chinese and Harappan characters, so that all of the civilizations emerging at that time can understand what you're saying. Because you're supposed to be the God of all people, right? Not just some tiny isolated few that are claiming to be the chosen ones, and that's why they live on that piece of worthless dirt that everybody's been fighting over forever, because it's the God of peace that's behind the perpetual war. Remember, all of the Abrahamic religions have been at war with each other, each continuously since their inception, and I think there's a flaw there. So, modern generations, given a book written in 4 different languages, will be able to get different perspectives to clarify exactly what you meant. Right? So you wouldn't need so many different English translations, because people in the modern languages can look back at those 4 other languages and they'll know exactly what you mean. There wouldn't be room for multiple interpretations for new languages and so forth. Especially if you write it yourself.
Street whore.
Rather than entrusting some insane scribe to distort your message before the first draft. And it doesn't have to be terribly long either. Once you take out all the meaningless tales of those savage kings killing everybody for no damned reason, you'll have plenty of room for the important stuff that somehow never made it into the Bible we have today. Everything that anyone wants to know can be narrowed down to a few basic questions that you'll have to answer, beginning with, how it all began. And don't worry about talking about the Big Bang, because we can already guess that any description of an inflation, a cosmic inflation from a singularity that is really a rift in the time-space continuum, is likely to confuse a handful of sheepshaggers. So let's just describe the formation of the Earth as a concretion of dust and rocks. But let them know that
stupid! Because that was stupid.
Because you don't want the Bible to be the first and original thing in the entirety of the cosmos. Because it doesn't make sense either to say that God worked on this world for 4 days. On the 5th day, he sneezed out the entire cosmos. 78 billion light years across, trillions of other galaxies full of billions of other stars, and all of the planets around them. That was all instantaneous, but it took him 4 days to work on this rock, and he still wasn't done. So, yeah, that implies to me that this was written from the perspective of the people who thought this planet was flat. So, let them know that the sun, give them some facts that they can use. Let them know that the sun is over 100 times bigger than the Earth, and that it is just another star, like, 1 grain of sand in an infinite beach or sea of sand dunes, because, even primitive minds can understand that perspective, right? And then what happens when their technology advances and they begin to confirm what you say? Because I've listened to Muslim apologists, for example, who talk about the stretching out of the heavens. They're referring to an old myth of Mithras, where you have this dome, the firmament that we know doesn't exist, and then the god Mithras had the stars sewn into his cloak, so he would drape his cloak over this firmament and pull it down. Now, this was all never meant, I don't think these stories were invented to literally fool children. I think that they believed that children would know that this is just a story. They couldn't foresee grown adults investing their lives and careers into this myth. They knew there was not a guy with a cloak over a dome. One would hope. But anyway, I'll say, so you also want to add that if there is life on other planets, that we might never meet them because they're all so far away. And you don't want to say whether there is life on other planets. You don't have to admit that you don't know. Just say that you're not saying. Now this will minimize the mythology, but also encourage curiosity too, and you want that to happen. So,
you dumbass.
Likewise, ancient people already had some idea that all life on this planet was connected somehow, maybe interrelated, because there were people talking about that like in 600 BC. So it would be easy enough to just confirm that and explain that there were generations of life forms changing over time before we came along. It's not a difficult story to understand. They kind of had a grasp of that already. Again, if you hint about paleontology, you can even inform them about fantastic beasts and where to find them. So as people advanced, they'll find more and more truth in your Bible, and it'll never be proven wrong, unlike all the holy books that we currently have. And people like their sacred tomes to have fulfilled prophecies, and yours would have that in spades, more so than any other. As a matter of fact, the Bible you could write, any of you, would be so much better than any of the scriptures we have now. There wouldn't be any other scriptures. They wouldn't be able to compete with yours. And isn't it funny that all the scriptures say that nobody can compete with them? Another thing you should have, listen to entertain this idea and wonder why it's not in the Bible, a numeric system. We're talking about people in a time that couldn't count. I mean, they had a counting system, but it was a confusing sexagesimal system. It was a numeric system on base 60, kind of like written on a clock. And they had to do this weird thing about numbering on the digits of their hand and the pieces of their fingers, because nobody had a numeral system. They hadn't even invented the number 0 until 2,000 years later. Give them a numeral system. Teach them how to count. That sounds like a good idea.
That's what the demons did in the time of the flood. Taught them.
Because remember that the God of the Bible, honestly, didn't give us any useful information at all. Because his knowledge was limited to that of the men who made him up. They had no understanding of where they were or where they came from, what was their position in time or space. They had no map, no calendar, no periodic table, nothing. Right? So for an intelligent species like us, that must have driven them mad. And that obviously happened, and that's why we have religion. The scriptures were written by orphans, daydreaming about an imaginary dad. But if a God wanted to be any kind of a father figure at all, the very least he should have done is teach his children, which the Bible God didn't do. And once you have a numeric system, let's throw something else in there that our current Bible doesn't have. You can also identify the time that your Bible was printed by connecting it to the dynasties of the day. In Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in China, in India. And be sure to mention which Pharaoh was in charge at the time, because Moses forgot to mention that, causing us all to guess incorrectly and disagree with each other. And otherwise, don't go into too much detail about the kings and principalities at the time, because they're not really important. You're just trying to identify when the book came out, so that people will have some perspective. And if you're going to do that, give them something else they don't really have. A calendar. Here, this book was printed on day 1 from your perspective. Because, every calendar ever created is different, because nothing is in round numbers like you would expect from an intelligent designer. So it took the longest time just to figure out how many days there are in a year, and a lot of cultures didn't get that right, because they all measure differently. The calendar we use now measures by days, but then there's others that measure by lunar periods. They didn't know. Teach them how to count. Give them a fucking calendar. Let's give them a clue. Help them out. So you've given your people a numeric system, and now you can tell them precisely how old the world is. From the day Thea crashed into the earth, creating our moon, all the way up to Sargon's conquest of Sumer and the 6th Egyptian dynasty. And we'll know how old the earth is. And so that the year that we consider now to be 2340 BCE would be the new zero, your year 0. Because you had to arbitrarily choose some day, so why not that particular Tuesday? Really, they should have had this book much earlier than that, but because you can't talk to them for some reason, you can do anything you want, but you can't talk to people. Can't invent a fucking telephone. You had to wait for them to invent their own written languages, and so that they could read what you have to write. And thus, we today would be in the year 4357 now. And that means that Jesus would have been born in the year 2340 on our calendar, except that we didn't need a Jesus, because there was never an original sin. There was nothing to save us from, since a moral God wouldn't have created a hell either. And a moral God would certainly not need a sacrifice. A God who can do anything he wants can forgive us any time he wants, and we don't have to do something unforgivable first, like crucifying the hippie on a stick. I'm sorry, was that too reverent? Your Bible can explain things. Your Bible can explain that what keeps humanity behaved is mostly family commitments and maybe some notions of karma, but mostly it's our laws and punishments, which what historically has been proven to really work anyway. For whatever reason, fear of God doesn't seem to deter any criminal, especially since they can just imagine that their imaginary friend already forgave them for it, or they're convinced he wanted them to do it. That's why the death penalty doesn't work. Yes, hurry up and get me with God. The death penalty is only a threat to atheists. So the Bible we already have has a lot of racism and sexism and condones a lot of barbaric cruelty, including slavery, which is repeatedly described as being just as brutal and cruel and no different than early American slavery. As my friend Matt Delapetty says, if you changed nothing else in the Bible but to say that it is moral to own a human being, you've already created a more holy book than what the Bible we have is. And I'm not just talking about slaves either. Remember that women were traded as commodities. They were treated as chattel to be bought and sold and to be used as needed or as desired to taste. And you can kill disobedient children too,
what the fuck are
or sell them into slavery. So if you want to present humanity with a good book that really is good, your guide to morality will first have to correct all these things that our current Bible got wrong. There's also a lot of contradictions in the law, like whether divorce is legal or not. It depends on which part of the Bible you read. And I think that a forward-thinking deity, as I hope we all are, would see marriage as a contract between equals. And this would be for child custody, for property ownership, for inheritance and taxation, because what else really is a marriage beyond that? What real importance does it have other than, you know, some financial recognition so you can minimize the number of lawyers necessary in your life? Fornication is only a problem if you need to establish paternity or you're worried about STDs. So another thing your Bible could probably mention is about infectious diseases. Wouldn't that have been useful information, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago? Because the Old Testament tells you to wash your hands, right? And all Christians brag about that, because how would they know? Nobody knew. Every child knows that you need to wash your raccoons. No. Because they had raccoon Jesus come down. However, the funny thing is that our Jesus told his followers not to wash their hands. Because, I love his reasoning, because what goes into a man cannot defile him. Because, Jesus explained, what he takes into his mouth does not go into his heart, it goes into his stomach and is therefore eliminated. So nothing you take into your mouth can defile you. So Jesus knew fuck all about nutrition or poison or any of that. And then he even said that what comes out of a man's mouth will defile him, because he believed that diseases were caused by demons that were evoked by curses and magic words. Right? This is your healer. This is the guy. This is the pinnacle of wisdom. So your Bible should probably correct that shit too, so that at least your readers will be smarter than some first century faith healer.
Fuck all.
Teach them about microbes and means of sterilization and the importance of purifying water. Wouldn't that have been good? Why didn't our Bible say anything useful or true? Back then they thought they could cure skin diseases and parasites by casting elemental spells of death magic and ritual sacrifice of killing animals and waving a wand full of blood at them. This is how they think they're going to cure diseases. How could a God of love or wisdom have allowed such ignorance for thousands of years and never teach his children anything at all? The book we're going to write is pretty much the opposite of everything that the Bible is or the Quran. And it's not just going to be a better book, it'd be better scriptures. Because it would be...
Is it just me, or does the evolutionary story keep changing?
Well, it's not a story, it's an investigation. That's why change is inevitable. The purpose of science is to improve understanding. The way to do that is to seek out the flaws in your current perception and correct them. You can't do that if you're forbidden to admit that there even could be flaws in whatever you've been told is the absolute truth. Science works like a game of 20 questions, where every new query is based on what is already known and continues from there to narrow the field of remaining possibilities to zero in on the truth. Something religions can't do. That's why faith fails those who seek truth. Religions shart off in every direction, creating heretical cults everywhere all the time, all of them pretending that they're getting back to the one real original truth that they just made up just now with no record of that interpretation in the past. If you change from one faith to another, you're just adopting a different mythology with no more support than the one you left behind. But if you walk away from faith itself, stop assuming things on faith and follow science instead, which is a matter of inquiry rather than belief, then instead of everything pointing every which way, as all religions do, then everything turns around and points to the one and only actual reality. The theory of evolution was always that living things diversify, where one original form becomes 2, and then 4, and then 8, and so on. How does that happen, and how far does it go? Darwin answered the latter question, and that answer never changed, except in the details that we've learned every year since then. Modern studies of population genetics answers the former question of how that mechanism works, with a continual flow of new information that also continues to confirm Darwin's original conclusion. Now, I had already begun this series rebutting John and Jane's feeble attempts to debunk evolution when Gutsick Gibbon did an episode addressing this same skit, the 4th of 12, which she charitably uploaded to Vice Rhino's channel.
Come on, you
Gutsick Gibbon is the YouTube username of a PhD student in paleoanthropology, which happens to be the topic today, and she did so well in her rebuttal that I wondered whether I should even bother trying to make one of my own, or should I just skip to the next skit. I mean, her and I are both correcting the same errors, so I'll have to cite many of the same facts that she did. What I could say wouldn't be profoundly different than what she already said, nor could my video be significantly better than hers was. But I can't include her video in my playlist. And I am passionate about this. This is my field too, and I do have some things to say. So, for the sake of continuity, I will leave a link to her video below, and I will address John and Jane in my own way as best I can.
Hi, John.
Hey.
Oh, hey. Hey, where'd this truck come from?
Up in the attic.
Right,
I was cleaning it out earlier and I found it, and it's got a whole bunch of junk in here, but some of it is actually helping me with our science homework.
Hey, check it out.
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick.
Look how out of date everyone looks.
Dick.
Was this really in style back then?
Stupid bitch.
Do you think our kids are going to look at our yearbooks and say the same things?
Nah.
Not just your kids. I'm old enough to be your grandpa, and I think my mother had that blouse when I was a kid. I think Jane's 1970s hippie blouse and John's bowling league shirt had both already gone out of style when I was younger than they are.
God fucking
So, how'd you say this trunk helped you?
Well, I'm starting to get the picture on human evolution.
God fucking damn it.
This book was published in 1925 by Sir Arthur Keith. And now he was the president of the Royal Anthropological Society of Great Britain.
And the skull?
It was found in 1912. Now, it called Piltdown Man the find of the 20th century.
Holy Ghost.
The writing of this skit is pretty bad. John never told us that the skull was called Piltdown Man. You're just supposed to know that already from having heard this story so often, every time the topic of evolution comes up in church.
I think it was the New York Times said that it proves the theory of evolution.
Remember that the job of the news media is to sell stories, typically through exaggeration. And nowadays, instead of proving the theory, every new discovery is described in the news as overturning previous theories or causing scientists to rethink their theories.
Stupid!
That discovery was predicted and expected because sensationalism sells.
There were like 500 articles published when they first found it. Then in 1953, they discovered that the skull was a fake.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Slut.
And they aged the skull. They made it look like it was really, really old. And then the jaw is actually from an orangutan.
Now listen to John act as though he's fighting back laughter at what he says, as if he would have known better, as if he thinks all the facts line up with his conspiracy theory.
And the guy who discovered it, he actually filed the teeth down and made it look real.
What the heck were scientists thinking?
You have to understand that at the time when Piltdown Man was presented,
now be a dumbass from that damn ear so I can dick you up good fashion with my dick.
That's when the UK was the most powerful nation on Earth. British imperialism then was much like American exceptionalism is today, very ethnocentric, thinking that they were
the best of the best of the best, sir.
British imperialists were okay with Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthalensis being discovered elsewhere in Europe, but Darwin predicted that the ancestor of all humanity should be found in Africa, and 20th century Europeans objected to the out-of-Africa theory like many Americans still object to it now, and for the same reason. Some people of my pallor don't want to accept their roots on the dark continent.
You suck my dick, bitch.
But then multiple specimens of Homo erectus had been discovered in Indonesia and other tropical areas, and the English did not like where the evidence was pointing. They wanted to believe that man had originated not just in Europe, but specifically in England. That not only had the sun never set on the British Empire, but that the very dawn of man was also British. And many Brits then were just like many Americans are now.
Probably be
if there is some fraud that appeals to our biases, then prejudiced people will accept it blindly without question.
Suck my dick, bitch.
And so too were the pompous Brits of that time duped when a crooked lawyer presented a fraudulent find that was exactly what they wanted to see.
Fucking bitch.
Now, who perpetrated that hoax, and why did they do it? Well,
you suck my
there are
dick,
4
bitch.
suspects, all of whom may have worked as accomplices. First is the lawyer Charles Dawson, who had tried to pass off fake fossils before. He claimed that this skull was unearthed by unnamed quarrymen in the same area of Sussex where the first recorded dinosaur discovery was made a century earlier. Another suspect was Martin Hinton, a museum volunteer who had reportedly had issues with the authorities working at the British Museum. A trunk belonging to Hinton was recently discovered to contain several unfossilized bones that had been chemically stained and treated in the same way that the Piltdown bones had been. The next suspect was the famous author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He had just written a science fiction story, The Lost World, which explained how to fake fossils as practical jokes. And that story was published in the same year as the Piltdown discoveries. He was also Dawson's neighbor, and he was present at the dig sites. And Doyle even had a motive to embarrass the British Museum, whom he hated, because they held to the scientific principle of methodological naturalism, which would not consider the supernatural as a scientific explanation. Doyle, however, was a mystic who believed in a form of pseudoscience that is now known as woo-woo. He was a member of the Ghost Club, investigating paranormal phenomena, and he was the founding member of the British Society for Psychical Research. Amusingly, he was also the author of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, so you'd think he'd be nobody's fool. Yet, he was duped by 2 little girls using paper dolls and trick photography to convince the public that fairies were real. One other likely conspirator was a Catholic priest named Pierre de Chardin, who was suspected of being in on a collaborative prank intended to embarrass the British Museum. He was another friend of Dawson's who had also been to the where he personally and conveniently discovered a tooth that was anticipated by other scientists studying the skull. As we now know that all of these bones were deliberately hidden there, they were all planted in their locations, and Father Deschardins seemed to already know precisely where to find exactly the right item needed to satisfy skeptics, is sufficient reason to raise an eyebrow. After Charles Dawson died, there were no more artifacts to be found, and while there were some notable skeptics who said that the skull and jaw did not belong together, there were as yet inadequate means of testing such things back then. In the 40 years since, many more fossil hominins were discovered over the tropical areas of Africa and Asia, and even some in southern Europe, but nothing like this anywhere in England. There were several new specimens showing a fluid progression from apes to man,
I'm going to kick your
and the
ass.
type of evolution they showed was so different from the Piltdown skull as to contradict it. That Dawson's fossil didn't fit. It was an increasingly out-of-place anomaly. Thus, the study of evolution itself called Piltdown Man into question. So one or more hucksters probably conspired to defraud the British Museum, possibly for religious reasons, and evolutionary scientists discovered and exposed the fraud, using fossils of human evolution to do so. Yet believers pretend that they can ignore all the real fossils because that odd one out was a fake. Or they want to pretend that instead of these 4 conspirators, evolution as a whole is a conspiracy of the entire worldwide scientific community, attempting to defraud the whole world. As if no scholar is smart enough to expose it, and only trailer park know-nothings know what's really going on.
Have you ever heard of Nebraska Man? Nebraska Man was the first American ape man fossil discovered. And Harold Cook found just a tooth.
Bet that made for us some news and museum display.
So much wrong with this already. First of all, if by ape man you mean to refer to hominin species, then Nebraska Man was not the first. It would have been the only if it had been at all. And Nebraska Man was originally called Hesperopithecus by Henry Fairfield Osborne,
You snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory, bitch.
Oddly enough, Osborne was one of the scientists who was not fooled by Piltdown men, then known as Eoanthropus. Osborne displayed the Piltdown fossils not as Eoanthropus, but as a mere mixture of human and ape fossils.
Okay,
However,
it's time to
fuck
your butt.
he was also the only scientist who thought that Cook's might belong to a human or some other form.
Hole!
Because even though Homo erectus was originally called Pithecanthropus, which means ape man, they changed the name to Homo erectus because it's silly to call it an ape
Like a man slut.
That's as redundant as using the word tuna fish.
Shit.
Yes, tuna are fish, just like iguanas are lizards, but we don't call them iguana lizards. Humans are a subset of apes, so referring to an ape man is just as silly as referring to a vertebrate man or a mammal man, because all humans are mammals and all mammals are vertebrates. More specifically, an ape is any member of the taxonomic superfamily Hominoidea, and we've been in that classification since the 1700s, when Carolus Linnaeus, a Christian creationist, invented taxonomy. And then he said,
I'm coming after that damn bitch shit. I didn't say bishop. I said bitch shit.
challenged the scientific community to prove them wrong.
B-I-S-H-I-T.
The eventual response came in the form of additional evidence that he was actually right.
B-I-S-H-I-T.
That humans are in fact a subset of apes, both by definition and derivation. Now, maybe Henry Fairfield Osborne was stupid that the first people should be American.
Stupid bitch.
But as the entire
Don't
rest
even
of the
think about it,
anthropological community reminded him over and over again, all of the evidence of human evolution was coming out of the tropical regions of the Old World, not the Americas. Scientist after scientist criticized Osborne's claim, demanding that he needed more evidence than just that tooth.
My dick, bitch.
But after 5 years of searching and finding none, Osborne publicly conceded that he was mistaken, that he must have misidentified the tooth because of how badly it had been worn by erosion after the fossil was exposed to the elements, that the damage done to it changed its appearance, such that it looked like something else, not what it really was.
Yeah, well, it was big enough for the New York Times, okay? And then it went viral for back then, and the London News did a whole drawing on it from a single tooth.
A whole drawing? Not just a half a drawing, or maybe a third of a drawing?
You
There's
suck
still
my
a picture
dick,
of him on
bitch.
Wikipedia.
They drew all that based on a tooth?
You suck my dick,
Well, I did
bitch.
tell you not to trust the public media when it comes to reporting science, because they're in the business of selling sensational stories.
Come on,
The Illustrated London News back then was like the tabloids of today. Look at old issues of the Weekly World News to get an idea of what I mean. When a disreputable rag like this gets a hold of what they think is a big story, they'll hire an artist to draw something up, because it is the Illustrated London News, after all. And they don't care how accurate the Illustrated is. They only care how sensational it is. If the story is about primitive humans, they'll draw what they think looked like primitive humans. Just like when the Weekly World News needed an illustration of Bat Boy. However, it should be noted that the Illustrated London News was harshly criticized by scientists for having commissioned that picture. Even Osborne himself, when he still thought that he had a human tooth, criticized that artwork as worthless speculation.
You suck my dick, bitch.
So don't act like it was the scientists who drew that.
You suck my
but
dick,
10 years
bitch.
later, they discovered out that that tooth was actually from an extinct pig.
No way.
Well, technically, no. The animal in question was more closely related to peccaries rather than pigs. But the animals associated with pigs were erroneously called pigs. If you were inclined to refer to peccaries as pigs, then that would be like referring to apes as people. Carolus Linnaeus did that too. In 1735, he classified chimpanzees and orangutans as separate species of human.
Yeah, so Piltdown Man was the popular proof for evolution for 40 years, and Nebraska Man was the popular proof for 10.
Makes you wonder about what they're teaching us today.
If you're getting your lessons from creationists,
You wonder about what they're teaching us today.
if you're getting your lessons from
Makes you wonder about what they're teaching us today.
The way she says and looks, the way she says the word today and looks, the way she says the word today smells like
bogus,
spit.
biased, deliberately deceptive, distorted propaganda they're feeding you. because Piltdown Man was a hard lesson learned by nerds who were so naive that they wouldn't even suspect that someone would lie to them in the name of science. I remember how your attitude changed the first time you realized that someone you trusted lied to you? Their heightened skepticism after that is part of how the peer review process came to be. Like the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. The Piltdown hoax was that one and only time. It taught scientists a lesson that creationists will never learn. Because the scientific community was never duped by another fraud the way creationists to this day still are, commonly, with lots and lots of examples of that. And they're helpless against it because they can't distinguish fact from fiction. If creationists knew how to expose a fraud, they wouldn't be creationists anymore.
I'm way ahead of you. Take a look at my little brother's 6th grade history book.
Really? Your brother's book? You have way too much time on your hands. Well, some of these 8 men look familiar.
Long-lost relatives of yours? No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's because they're in our book as well.
And they're long-lost relatives of yours as well.
You whore.
Oh, well, in our book, they say
You suck my slut,
Australopithecus
bitch.
evolved 3.8 to 3 million years ago. But in the 6th grade book, Australopithecus evolving 4 to 5 million years
You
ago.
suck my dick, bitch.
That's because Linnaeus set up a binomial system of classification, which we don't use much anymore because we understand more than he did. That's how science changes. It's a self-correcting process that is always improving, where religious dogma starts out wrong and just gets wronger over time. In the Linnaean binomial system, the first name is the genus. The second name is the species. You see, there's usually multiple species within a genus, multiple genera within a family, and so on. And there are more than a half dozen Australopith species known so far. Your little brother's 6th grade book refers to the earliest known species of this genus, Australopithecus anamensis, which appeared between 4 and 5 million years ago, just like the book says. And as your other book says, another species, Australopithecus afarensis, appeared later on. So both books are correct, referring to different species of the same genus. John and Jane just haven't read enough of the textbook to understand what it's saying.
Uh-huh.
God fucking damn it.
Look at this. This is an old 1951 Life magazine publication.
According to this, Australopithecus lived 1 million to 500,000 years ago. Wow, that's different by a few million years. These dates are all over the place.
Because, as we said in a previous episode of this series, radiometric dating is a complex process that didn't become reliable until the 1950s, and it has become much more precise since then, as technicians learned more about it and refined their techniques. Though even if it was the state of the art way back in 1951, there's little chance that a popular magazine is going to have the latest and most accurate results. Life magazine is not a scientific journal. It's just reflecting an impression that the popular media had back then, as we also see reflected in movies from the 50s using the same time scale.
George, here in Tokyo, time has been turned back 2 million years. This is my report as it happens.
You suck my dick,
Prehistoric
bitch.
monster the Japanese call Godzilla has just walked out of Tokyo Bay. He's as tall as a 30-story building.
Yeah, well, it gets worse. So this is our biology, the whole biology book.
A whole biology book? Not just half or a third of one?
Okay.
And it shows Homo habilis as living 1.6 to 1.9 million years ago. But in the 6th grade one, it's 2.4 million years ago.
So which one's true?
I guess it depends on which class you're in.
Again, they're both true because they both say the same thing. It's just that John doesn't know how to read, or he can't even understand the pictures he's looking at. The 6th grade book does indeed say that Homo habilis evolved 2.4 million years ago, but the whole biology book also says that Homo habilis evolved 2.4 million years ago. Look at the range in the illustration, from roughly 2.4 million years to 1.6 million years. Where did John get the idea that it went from 1.6 to 1.9? Nothing on here even looks like that. Does he expect us to trust him over our own eyes?
So, what I'm wondering is if any of these dates are correct.
Well, every date in your textbook has been correct so far. The only wrong date came from a magazine rather than a scientific journal, so it was written by journalists rather than scientists. Don't get your science from the popular press.
It looks like today's truth is just tomorrow's fiction.
Such is the illusion that John and Jane are trying to create by misunderstanding and misrepresenting what is clearly explained right there in their textbook. They're just trying to deny reality, to pretend that facts are merely opinions, even when the facts in question never changed and have instead been consistently confirmed, while their creationist claims have always only ever been overturned.
If you look back at all the textbooks, they're all published at about the same time.
And they say the same thing.
Take a look at my little brother's 6th grade book.
God, fuck it.
This book shows all of the popular fossils today.
I just fucked up.
So here we are, Homo sapiens, right?
But check out what came before us.
Homo erectus.
Right. And while he had a human
Like I said,
body,
I just
evolutionists
fucked
like
up.
to point out that he had
That
a different
fucking pisses
skull,
me
at least
off.
a modern human skull.
God.
Homo
fuck
erectus
it.
had different dimensions to their body than we do. Compare those ribs to that pelvis and try to imagine what his torso looked like. Not like ours. Now try to imagine these guys twerking. There's not much to twerk with. And look at those legs. Look how long they are. This guy looks more like a frog than we do.
Now, the journal Science, back in October of 2013, they reported they found skulls in Georgia, like Russia. It shows how different the Homo erectus skulls can look.
Wow, they are so different.
Homo erectus was the most diverse
Come
of
on,
all
you
human
slut.
species, with a wide range from southern Europe and the Middle East through Africa, southern Asia, and Indonesia for up to 2 million years, at a time when the only way to get from place to place was by walking or maybe hitching a ride on a makeshift raft, which would have been the height of their technology.
Come
After
on, you
hundreds of
slut.
thousands of years of various groups living in relative isolation, different populations grew apart from each other, with another wide range of height and
Come on,
skeletal features
slut.
and even brain sizes, leading to different names for certain subgroups, like Homo ergaster, Soloensis, Leakii, Picanensis, and Homo georgicus, which is the tribe we're looking at here. These fossils from Dmanisi, Georgia, didn't just look like a diverse collection, they also showed an impressive range
Come
of
on,
brain
you
sizes,
slut.
the smallest being 546 cc's. That's a couple hundred cc's bigger than a chimpanzee brain and as big as the largest Australopith's brains. But the largest brain among the
Come on, you
Dmanisi
slut.
skulls was 775 cc's. That's still a couple hundred cc's below the average for Homo erectus. With a maximum of 1,000 cc's or so, the smartest erectus is about equal to some of the dumber sapiens, like
Homo erectus and human skulls can be very similar.
That's like saying that mallards can be very similar to ducks, or that ducks can be similar to birds. Mallards are
Man,
ducks, and
I think I
ducks
see
are
a dick in
birds.
my future.
And Homo erectus
Yep.
was human, just not the same
God,
species of
fuck
human
it.
that we are. I mean, does this look human to you?
God, fuck it.
How about this one?
In fact, they did a study on 202
Move, you street
modern-day
whore.
Aborigines, like Australians, on
Slut,
the
I
shape of
want
their
to
skulls.
move duck
They
toothpaste,
found that
not
14
one.
of the
You
17
fucking street
traits
whore from hell.
were the same on the Aborigines
You
as
fucking
on the
street
Homo
whore from
erectus
China.
skulls.
I read that study, and while that sentence is there, the implication is not. John wants you to think that Australian Aborigines are basically the same thing as Homo erectus, which
God,
is hugely
fuck
insulting
it.
to those people, since all modern humans have about the same average brain size, and erectines typically had 2/3 the brain that
God,
modern Homo
fuck
sapiens
it.
do. But once again, we see that what John reads is not what it actually says. In fact, even though the study is 50 years old and uses language
This
we
is
would not
getting
use
boring.
today, it still compares modern human deems and
It's true the Earth has layers. That's not the question. Okay? How did they get there, though?
Kinham.
I mean, if that layer sat there for 10 million years waiting for the next one, don't you think it's going to rain once in a while in 10 million years? Why are there no erosion marks between the layers? Why are they stacked on top of each other just like a stack of pancakes?
Come on, you slut.
You don't have complete layers suddenly appearing all at once and then sitting around stagnant for 1 million years of nothing happening until the next fully completed layer suddenly appears out of nowhere.
Give me that shit again.
Instead, they're constantly accumulating or eroding or alternating between the two.
Once in a while in 10 million years? Can you...
You suck my slut, bitch.
It's true the Earth has layers. That's not the question. Okay? How did they get there, though?
Okay.
I mean, if that
That were a
layer
bunch
sat there
of
for 10 million
dumbasses.
years waiting for the next one,
Fucking
don't
bitch.
you think it's going to rain once in a while in 10 million years? Why are there no erosion marks between the layers? Why are they stacked on top of each other just like a stack of pancakes?
You don't have complete layers suddenly appearing all at once and then sitting around stagnant for a million years of nothing happening until the next fully completed layer suddenly appears out of nowhere. Instead, they're constantly accumulating or eroding
You
or
suck
alternating
my
between
dick,
the two
bitch.
that whole time. And yes, the rain comes and goes, contributing to both erosion and deposition, depending on the
God
local environmental
fucking damn it.
conditions in a particular place at that moment in
Holy
geologic history.
Ghost.
Most of this preacher's errors I could correct myself, but I'd never heard of
Holy
erosion
Ghost.
marks. Wasn't sure what he was talking about there. So I thought it'd be
Holy
better to
Ghost.
get the opinion of experts literally in the field to translate some of this
Holy
preacher's
Ghost.
gibberish. Paleontologist Julien Benoit
Holy
and Mark
Ghost.
van den Brandt from the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg both said we do have erosion marks, but that no one calls them that. They call them unconformities.
Come on, you
instead,
slant-eyed
assuming that's what the
slut.
preacher means. It's hard to tell since he doesn't use proper terms or definitions. American geologist Stephen Bowman, executive director of the Midwest Institute of Geosciences and Engineering,
God,
said that the term
fuck it.
erosion marks was completely made up by young Earth creationists, if not by this preacher himself, since he has a history of misusing
God,
or misstating
fuck it.
terms he doesn't understand. Dr. Bowman thought
God,
that maybe he meant
fuck it.
sole or scour marks or carved channels, perhaps, but we don't know what the
God,
preacher's talking
fuck
about
it.
because the preacher doesn't know what he's talking about.
God.
And by the way,
fuck
why
it.
are there no soil layers between the rock layers? I mean, soil builds up on top of rock. Don't you think there'd be some soil built up once in a while?
He thinks there are no soil layers between the
You
strata.
suck my dick, bitch.
What does he think the strata is made of? Yeah, if it's an alluvial deposit, then of
Fucking
course there
bitch.
are soil layers which have hardened into rock because of
You
being compressed
slut.
under successive layers of subsequent
You
deposition.
street whore.
Paleontologist Mark van der Brandt responded to this preacher as if teaching a child. Dr. van der Brandt was confused as to why a grown man would presume to refute the entire global geoscience community without even understanding first-year basics. Because unlike preachers, scientists are trained that
Stupid, you stupid
publicly
bitch.
shooting your mouth off with embarrassing
You
ignorance.
stupid fucking. I do not believe. I noticed that news, man. I noticed that news. I did not actually believe you were gonna be that black.
Dr.
Fucking
Benoit's
stupid
response
to
was,
make
I
that
think, much
move.
more appropriate
You
in this
stupid
case.
bitch.
He points out that if there was soil, because there won't be if it's a marine deposit, soil only happens on land, but if there is soil, then yeah, it eventually hardens, and that geologists refer to fossilized soil as paleosoil. Depending, as I said, on the type of
I
deposition.
see a
So
dick
we
in
actually
your
do have
picture.
what the
I
preacher said
see
we
a
don't
dick.
have, because what does he
Dick.
know about anything?
Dick.
Look, if you get a jar of dirt and rocks and
You
gravel
suck
and sand
my
and mud
dick,
and
bitch.
shake it up and set it down, it settles into layers
God,
for you in a few
fuck it.
minutes. Doesn't take long. How many seen those things you buy at the mall
God,
with two pieces of
fuck
glass
it.
and different colored sand in between? You know, you flip it over and it makes all kinds of layers just in a
God,
few seconds.
fuck it.
It doesn't take long.
This is creationist claim number CH561.2. The argument that all fossils and all geologic layers can be explained by hydrological sorting in a mythical flood that would have killed virtually everything, even in the oceans. But as we will see as this series continues, hydrological sorting doesn't
you
and
slut.
can't explain anything we actually do see.
God
And if the
fucking
geologic
damn it.
column really was formed by hydrological sorting, then
Come
everything
on,
would
you
look
slut.
entirely different than it does. We wouldn't
Come
always
on,
have the
you
same
street
type
whore.
fossils consistently found in the exact same stratigraphic layer in every geographic area all around the world, unless that layer represents a geologic timescale.
God fucking
We
damn it.
wouldn't have ichthyosaurs always being in or nearest the Jurassic layers all around the world, always below mosasaurs, which are themselves always below transitional males, and all of them are always above Paleozoic fauna like Eurypterids. You wouldn't have heavier animals always appearing above
God
buoyant
fucking
ones,
damn it.
or faster
God
ones below
fuck
the
it.
slower ones, always consistently divisible by their
Holy
time period,
Ghost.
rather than the unintelligible jumbled mess that they would be
God
if all
fuck
the
it.
strata in the world had been caused by the same giant flood. Hydrologic sorting certainly can't explain the fossilized footprints and raindrops mentioned in the first episode of the series. These pristine features can only be preserved if they have just a little bit of stagnant water and are allowed to bake dry in a calm setting and then be gently coated in a protective silt, perhaps, before the next layers are packed on. Hydrologic sorting is rapid and violent and doesn't allow for any of that.
Because that was stupid.
Footprints and most of the other
that was stupid.
Cannot have possibly formed under the Noah's flood conditions. Nor can hydrological sorting account for the fact that the same layers exist in different types of deposits, but with the same fossils found in them all around the world. Not hydrologically sorted by their weight or by their buoyancy, but rather obviously by the time period in which those species existed.
I was preaching years ago in Union Center, South Dakota. Now, Union Center is right there. It's not even on the map.
You street whore.
And South Dakota puts everything they can find on the map just to kind of fill in the white places, you know. Well, there were 40 people in the whole town. 38 of them came to church. Other two must have been pulling a calf, I reckon. I don't know. But boy, we had a great meeting, and the preacher said, "Hey, Hovind, let's go down to Rapid City. They've got a bunch of dinosaurs in the museum there." I said, "Oh, all right, I like dinosaurs. Let's go." So we all drove down to Rapid City. We came to this museum, and a guide met us at the door. He said, "Hey, folks, would you like me to give you a tour?" We said, "That would be great, sir." Come on, you street whore. Well, the first place we stopped on the tour was the geologic time chart. They have it lit up, and it's behind glass, and it's holy and sacred. Don't dare touch that thing, you know. So we're standing over there, and the guy said, "Now, folks, this layer of rock right here is about 70 million years old." And it's so cool because
I see another dumbass movie,
tone in their voice, you know? 70 million years old. Oh.
You dumb fuck clock, bitch.
Well, my daughter was 12 years old at the time. She raised her hand. She said, "Mister, how do you know that layer is 70 million years old?" He said, "Honey, that's a good question. We tell the age of the layers by what types of fossils we find in them. They're called index fossils." And by the way, that's correct. That's what the textbook says. Scientists use index fossils to determine the age of rock layers. She said, "Thank you, sir." We walked around the other side. We're standing over here, and the guide said, "Now, folks, these bones are about 100 million
I'll semicolon the fuck out of you.
My daughter raised her hand again. She said, "Sir, how do you know those bones are 100 million years old?" He said, "Well, honey, we tell the age of the bones by which layer they came from." She said, "Sir, when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the bones, and now you're telling me you know the age of the bones by the layers." She said, "Isn't that circular reasoning?" I thought, wow, a chip off the old block. That guy had the strangest look on his face. It was almost as if he were thinking. He looked at my daughter, he looked at me. I wasn't about to help him. I thought, wow, this is going to be good. I have got to hear this. He looked back at my daughter, he said, "Wow, you're right, that is circular reasoning." He said, "I never thought of that before." That fellow drove 50 miles one way that night to come hear me speak in Union Center, South Dakota. The crowd swelled to 39. We set up a chair in the aisle. Afterwards, he talked to me for an hour. He said, "Hovind, is everything I believe about geology wrong? I teach this stuff at the college."
This storyteller expects us to believe that a tour guide around about 1991 was also a college-level geology teacher who's working as a tour guide and who doesn't know anything about geology, even though he teaches it in college. And yet he thinks that geology is a belief system rather than a measurably accurate understanding. It is true that paleontologists in the field have traditionally used index fossils to give relative dates, like how mosasaurs are usually associated with the Cretaceous and ichthyosaurs are associated with the Jurassic.
Come on, you
because mosasaurs are always found among other Cretaceous species, and ichthyosaurs are usually found among Jurassic species, though the most primitive ones did appear in the latter part of the previous period, and one genus lasted until the early part of the next period. So we can use the fossils to give relative dates, which ones are older or younger than others. It is also true that we cannot give an actual age in numbers of years unless we know which stratigraphic layers they came from. The Jurassic strata, for example, no matter where in the world it is, has been consistently dated radiometrically to between 200 million and 145 million years ago. While Cretaceous strata, everywhere in the world, is radiometrically dated from the end of the Jurassic to roughly 65 million years ago. Now, radiometric dating has
Well,
improved
it's not too
significantly
late.
over the last half century.
I can dick up
with
that
current readings
whore.
focusing
I can
closer
dick up both
to
his rook and his
66
bishop for the
30,000
price
years ago
free.
for the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction that ended
Bitch,
the
suck my
Mesozoic era
dick,
of the
bitch.
dinosaurs and began the era of mammals. Now, a mere tour guide at a local museum might not have known better, but everyone teaching college-level geology, as this
Come on,
tour
you
guide was
slut.
also said to do, would have known better than
That's gonna
this story
fucking piss
says.
me off of you, Castles.
So it is just a story
That's gonna
and a
fucking
tall
piss
tale
me
at that.
off.
I said,
Well,
oh,
maybe
no,
not.
no, I like geology. I've got a huge fossil collection, rock collection, mineral collection. I teach earth science. I love studying geology.
Yeah, he loves studying geology, just as long as he doesn't actually study geology. Because he
God
never took a class
fucking
in that
damn
or anything else, and he doesn't even have the first year basics. He doesn't know
Come
enough
on, you
about
slut.
geology to know what a rock is.
If you freeze oxygen, would you call that a rock?
Well, a super cold crystal like ice, I guess, or I'm not sure if
We're
that's...
talking about oxygen right now.
Yeah, I don't know if...
Frozen hydrogen. Can you freeze hydrogen to make it into a rock?
You're diverting to a different topic now.
The same topic. The same topic you would like to divert away from. But yeah, it's if we cannot ever refer to these things as rocks simply because they're
Come on, you
frozen,
slut.
because they're not actually minerals, then we cannot call them rocks.
I said, but as far as the layers being different ages, I said, yes, sir, I'm sorry. That
Come
is
on, you
all
slut.
baloney. It's based on circular reasoning. I'll show you. Here's a textbook that tells the kids to date the rocks by the fossils, and on the very next page it says date the fossils by the rocks. On the next page, and they don't catch it. It's a lie. Circular reasoning.
Circular.
That's not what it says.
Fucking.
If you can read the slide, you'll see
reasoning.
that both pages are talking
Slut.
about relative dates, and neither one says to date the fossils by the rock. The second page is describing the concept of
Come on, you
superposition.
slut.
I can't find the
Come, you
30-year-old
street
textbook that
whore.
this preacher is referencing, but the current edition from this century
Fucking street
explains
whore.
relative dating using the same analogy of stacking newspapers to understand superposition. Then, it also clearly explains radiometric dating, which is how we know the age of the rocks in numbers of years. Later, it gives another summary explanation of how radiometric dating works, and then in the context, the
Come
lesson
on, you
requires
slut.
that the student should be able to explain the difference between relative dating and radiometric dating, and
Come on,
explain
you
how
whore.
scientists use radiometric dating to approximate a rock's age.
You slut.
These are things that the preacher should have read in the very book that he cited. That book says that we can tell by the fossils which geologic layer it is, and we can use radioisotopes to tell how old
Come
that
on, you
layer
whore.
is. So it is not circular reasoning, and it never was. This preacher just doesn't know how to read for comprehension of things he doesn't want to understand, or that he doesn't want you to understand. He's been corrected about this over and over again over the years, but he's still repeating the same error, knowing how and why it is wrong.
It cannot be denied from a strictly philosophical standpoint. Geologists are arguing in a circle. The relative ages of rocks are determined by the organisms they contain. They date the rocks by the fossils and the fossils by the rocks.
It might have seemed that way from a strictly philosophical standpoint, perhaps, way back in 1949.
Man, this
But you have to
fucking
remember
pissed
that
me off.
the mass spectrometer had just been invented, and it hadn't yet been employed in radiometric dating. So relative dating, which is accurately described here,
Come on, you
was
street
the
whore.
only reliable method in regular practice at that time.
Come on,
Remember
you
Godzilla,
street
King of the
whore.
Monsters, the old one with Raymond Burr from 1956?
Here in Tokyo, time has been turned
Yeah.
back 2 million years.
2 million years?
No.
To the time of the
Oh,
dinosaurs,
I
not
thought you were already
66
in bed.
million years.
No.
That's because that was their best
You do.
estimate back then, before we had absolute dates proving that the Earth was actually far older than anyone had even imagined.
Ever since the beginning of the 19th century,
Night.
fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating
Sir.
and correlating the rocks in which they occur.
Yes, if
Thank
you were
you.
working in the field 40 years ago,
Yes.
fossils would have been the very best way of accurately dating which strata you're working on. Even today, if you want to use a different method, you'll have to find closely associated igneous rock, get a GPS reading of its location, and then send samples off to a lab to be radiometrically dated. Mark Vandenbrand and Julian Benoit usually send theirs to MIT in the United States. But that doesn't help when you're still in the field, does it? So when you're on site, the best way is to use index fossils to identify the strata, and then wait for the radioisotopes to tell you how old in years that deposition is.
Apart from very modern examples, which really are archaeology, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. They don't date fossils by potassium-argon dating or carbon dating. That's not how they do it.
They actually do use carbon dating on some things, because carbon-14 is the only way of dating bones and such directly. But the half-life is so short that it only works on recent remains, only a few thousand years old. Anything up to 50,000 years isn't likely to have enough radiocarbon left in it. That's why carbon dating works in archaeology, but not so much for paleontology. Potassium-argon has a much longer half-life, but it can't be used to date fossils directly because it doesn't work on sedimentary rock. Instead, they use it to date igneous rock. And we can use that to get much more precise dates than the wide blocks of 50 to 80 million years for each geologic period. For example, I was on a paleontological expedition in South Africa last year with Mark van den Brandt and Julian Benoit and a few other experts, where we had detailed maps documenting ash falls and lava flows on either side of the strata that we were working on. These were radiometrically dated such that I remember one of the exposed areas of sedimentary deposition just under one of these igneous layers was known to be just slightly older than 262 million years, well into the Permian period. So of course it's no surprise that we kept finding Permian therapsids and parareptiles. We found one temnospondyl and even a proto-turtle on the half-shell. But there were no dinosaurs there because they hadn't evolved yet. This rock was Paleozoic, not Mesozoic.
Radiometric dating would not even be possible if the geologic column had not been erected first.
Yeah, that's not correct. If we somehow had reliable post-1950s or better 1980s radiometric dating methods prior to the advent of paleontology in the 1700s, we still would have identified two earth-shattering mass extinctions framing the beginning and the end of the Mesozoic era, as distinguished from the Paleozoic before it and the Cenozoic after it. We would still use fossils to identify each of the subdivisions therein and would eventually arrive at the exact same perception we have now.
The intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning in the use of rocks to date fossils and fossils to date rocks. The geologist has never bothered to think of a good reply, feeling the explanations are not worth the trouble as long as the work brings results. This guy said the rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. I think the cheese done fell out of his sandwich. That's what I think. Okay, he's a few fries short of a Happy Meal.
Some science writers have the same opinion about him. Keith Littleton of Talk.Origins wrote a review of J.E. O'Rourke's article, Pragmatism and Materialism in Stratigraphy, where all these quotes come from. Littleton said that it was rambling, confused, and poorly worded, more about bad philosophy than about geology, such that it was surprising that something so extremely poorly written ever got published in a scientific journal.
It's based on circular reasoning, okay? This guy said the charge of circular reasoning can be handled several ways. It can be ignored as not the proper concern of the public. It can be denied by calling down the law of evolution. It can be admitted as a common practice or avoided by pragmatic reasoning.
And the very next paragraph says that the first step is to explain what is done in the field in simple terms that can be tested directly. The fieldman records his sense perceptions on isomorphic maps and sections, abstracts the more diagnostic rock features, and arranges them according to their vertical order. He compares this local sequence to the global column obtained from a great many man-years of work against his predecessors. As long as this cognitive process is acknowledged in the pragmatic basis of stratigraphy, both local and global sections can be treated as chronologies without reproach. All of this shows that J.E. O'Rourke knew full well that the ages of geologic stratigraphy were not based on circular reasoning, despite a then common perception.
There's no way simply to look at a fossil and say how old it is unless you know the age of the rocks it comes from. This is Niles Eldredge, one of the most famous evolutionists alive today.
And he's right, as I've just explained. You can tell from the fossil which layer it came from, but only radiometric dating will tell you how old that layer is.
He said, and this poses something of a problem. Yeah, something poses a big problem, Niles. If we date the rocks by the fossils, how can we then turn around and talk about patterns of evolutionary change through time in the fossil record? Circular reasoning.
This is just dishonest and grossly, deliberately taken out of context. Here's the original quote. Notice how the two selected sentences were not originally stuck together, but were a whole paragraph apart, and how everything that was edited out, as well as the sentences immediately following that, all talk about the importance of radiometric dating, thus directly contradicting what this preacher wants you to think it says, and proving that dating of geologic stratigraphy is not based on circular reasoning.
Come on, you slut.
Now, do you think it's possible that someone read through all of this and snipped out just these sentences without realizing what all the rest of in the middle said? Of course they knew what it really said. But it's not going to strengthen anyone's faith to hear the truth, now is it? Because some people, especially religious extremists, don't care about the truth. They want to believe, and to make others believe. It's all about make-believe. For way too many people anymore, truth no longer matters, only appearances. And this is religious extremist science denial, which is all about pretending. That's what their faith is, ultimately, the power of imagination. Fake it till you make it. Just keep lying to yourself until you believe it. You know, I've actually known a couple of evangelicals who admitted that they live by that motto. That's why you can never explain evolution to a creationist. They don't want to know. Even if they suspect that it's true, they don't want to hear it. They don't care, because it's not what they want to believe. I went to a creationism lecture at a church near my house where the speaker held a 2-hour lie-a-thon, and at the end I stood up and called him out with clear evidence that he was lying the whole time. The sad thing is, the congregation didn't care. They were angry at me because they paid to have this guy lie to them, to tell them that the reality isn't real, and to comfort and reinforce their faith so that they can continue to believe things they already know are not true. And here I am, walking to ruin their fantasy. That's what their religion is all about. Creationism, especially young earth creationism, is not and does not like the truth. They want to make believe something else instead. Now, if you care what the truth is, then let me explain that centuries ago, most Europeans believed that the world was a recent creation, but others, like Aristotle, believed that the earth was eternal, that it had always existed. And some cultures thought that it had a beginning, but no one, not even the Christians, had a good idea of when or what that was. Around the year 1700, a French diplomat named Benoit de Maillet calculated what he thought was the constant recession of sea levels. He didn't know that these oscillate. He didn't know about paleoclimatology or tectonic plate movement, but he used his hypothesis to estimate that the Earth must be at least 2 billion years old by now. And remember that in the last episode, the preacher said that James Hutton was the one who started all this old Earth stuff, but de Maillet died when Hutton was only 9 years old, so the preacher's wrong about that too. In 1750, Edmund Halley, another Christian, tried to calculate the accumulation of ocean salinity. Others then used that method to estimate that the Earth should be at least 25 million years old. In 1749, Georges-Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, began publishing his many, many volumes of Histoire Naturelle, in which he argued for a world formed out of molten rock, the result of a cataclysmic cosmic collision and cooling over a period that he estimated to be roughly 70,000 to 75,000 years. And like many at that time, he believed that life forms appeared spontaneously, but he didn't think simple organisms advanced to become larger or more complex. Instead, he thought that even large animals emerged as spontaneous and perhaps supernatural creations. In 1864, James Kroll used a method called astronomical tuning, connecting the oscillation of the ice ages with variations in Earth's orbit to estimate the prominent eccentricity maximum of the last glacial epoch at 850,000 years ago. Other people tried other means, but the best they could ever do were estimates based often on faulty assumptions or incomplete data, so we're always wrong. Lord Kelvin, for example, was head of the Christian Evidence Society, and he was a self-professed believer in intelligent design.
I see a dick in your picture. I see a dick.
That it was not unscientific.
Dick.
Despite Kelvin's mastery of thermodynamics,
I see a big dick in your picture.
At least 20 million years old. Then he found out about sources of radiation deep in the Earth, and that pushed his estimates back much further.
I'm thinking the
Christians who were trained in science knew that the Earth was really old,
make you suck
200 years ago, but no one knew how old until the advent of radiometric dating. It was only about 100 years ago that we learned how to calculate decay rates, and it was within my lifetime that scientists finally figured out the best method yet to calculate the true age.
I'm fixing to stick my dick in your butt and twist! You street whore, you slut. You slant-eyed slut. No bits. No. You stupid bitch.
Actually, at the Scopes Monkey Trial, 1925, over here in Tennessee.
Stupid! You stupid moron!
100 miles, okay. This is what they were going
now
to
I got my whore. And now I'm fixing to stick my dick in your butt and twist!
275 of the court transcript.
Slut.
No, the oldest layers are not obviously the oldest. Did you know in still water, sediment layers settle out, the bottom one first, and then the second one, and then the third one? That's correct. But in moving water, you can get 5 or 6 or 10 layers to form simultaneously. They form from one end and travel across. So it's possible to have a fossil on the bottom that is younger than a fossil on top, if it's moving water.
But in previous episodes of this series, we've already shown that
I'm fixing to get myself another whore.
In fact, we have evidence directly contradicting that. We're usually looking at a different type of deposition with delicate fossil formations that cannot form except in a still water or even alluvial water. And the fact that other strata exist on top of such fossils is further evidence against your global flood. Massive floods leave profound evidence of several types everywhere that are entirely different, or would be entirely different than what we're seeing anywhere in the stratigraphic column. The fossil record is obviously not a product of hydrological sorting. Even when there is evidence of a localized flood in a given area, that event is also traceable to a particular period in time. We also have global correlation of index fossils, further confirmed by the occasional interruption of a volcanic eruption, or at least a layer of volcanic ash, showing again that these layers could not have all come down at the same time.
Yeah, I just fucked up your
ages is just further confirmation of what their physical existence already shows. There is no evidence for the mythical flood of Noah's Ark, but there is profound evidence against it from several different independent fields of study. I'll put a link below to a debunking of the pseudoscience of Noah's Ark by the Physics Department of Southern Methodist University here in Dallas, Texas. I made an 8-part video series myself citing professional scientists and showing how meteorology, geology, paleontology, dendrochronology, zoology, anthropology, archaeology, and even mythology all disprove the myth of a global flood. It couldn't happen.
I'm fixing to get 3 whores in your asshole.
Instead, we have proof of evolution and deep time, which I will continue to show as this series continues.
There's a great video tape called Experiments in Stratification. It covers all that if you want
I'll see if I can get 7 whores in his asshole.
I watched the cited video, and Stephen Bowman, the geologist I consulted with, mentioned it too. He said what they discovered in that video was cross-bedding, news only to young Earth creationists. He gave me quite a long explanation beyond that, referring to his own research and personal experience, so rather than quote him saying all that here, I will leave it to him to make his own video addressing that one. I'm only addressing this one.
I like to ask evolutionists, I say, guys, your geologic column contains limestone quite a few places. If I handed you a piece of limestone, how would you know if it's 100 million year old Jurassic limestone or 600 million year old Cambrian limestone? I mean, exactly what's the difference? They'd say, well, the only way to tell the difference is by the index fossils. That's precisely my point. They date the layers by the fossils.
If you're a field geologist and you find a layer of exposed limestone, you'd have to get a GPS reading of it and examine the horizons around it to properly associate it with igneous rock above or below it in order to get a radiometric age of it. But if some dolt walks into your office and hands you a chunk of fossiliferous limestone and asks you how old it is, you don't know where he got it, at what level, and what formation. You'd need to see the exact spot for yourself to document and date the strata. Without that, then the only way left is to look at the fossils in the rock. So it is not the circular argument that this preacher makes it out to be. It's also important to note that neither hydrological sorting nor crossbedding could create multiple layers of sandstone like this, with even the appearance of one being from the beginning of the Paleozoic era and another being from the middle of the Mesozoic, like in this preacher's example. This is one of many details that the creationists should explain, but cannot. Believing in a young Earth is much like believing in a flat Earth. There is no working model, and believers know there isn't, but they don't care. They don't want one. They're not trying to figure out what the truth is. They're trying to convince themselves of what they want the truth to be. And sometimes they'll even admit that they already know that what they believe isn't really true. So they don't want a model. They just want to complain about what they call the evolutionary models that they don't want to understand. There is a lot in stratigraphy that creationism cannot account for. For example, I was on a paleontological expedition in South Africa where most of the exposed rock was Permian. So, of course, all the fossils we found were just what you would expect to find from that period. And the Permian period, and indeed the Paleozoic era, ended with a rare type of volcanic eruption called a flood basalt. We know this because of the Siberian traps, where many successive layers of magma cooled on top of previously cooled layers, in stacks many layers deep, or many kilometers thick. And these layers cover an area of millions of square kilometers, far bigger than any volcanic eruption humans have ever seen. And remember, there's no fossils in igneous rock for obvious reasons, but igneous rock can be directly dated radiometrically. And those dates tell us that these repeating, pulsating eruptions went on for at least 500,000 years, roughly 250 million years ago. Here's how I describe that event in my series on the systematic classification of life. Although the animals and plants of this world looked very different than the ones we know now, the climate was about the same as what you and I grew up in, until a cataclysmic volcanic eruption began in what is now eastern Russia. This was an extremely rare type of eruption called a flood basalt, where hundreds or thousands of square miles or more can be covered in a vast flood of lava. Successive layers of these floods cover each other, creating a stairway effect called traps, based on the Swedish word for stairs. Eruptions like this evidently occurred maybe a dozen times since then and are often associated with mass extinctions, but none have ever happened in human history. We've never seen anything on this scale. And this one, the Siberian traps, was the biggest and therefore the worst eruption ever in the geologic history of the world. It wasn't just a volcano either, but rather a network of them from a common source, a 20-mile wide crack in the Earth's crust. And this prompted a series of repeated waves of volcanic networks to continue pluming in constant succession for well more than 100,000 years, with each eruption being more massive than anything in human experience, such that an area the size of Australia or the United States was eventually completely covered in lava up to a mile deep. Had it been divided continents
have
like
one
we
place
today,
to go.
the damage wouldn't have been so extensive.
I'm gonna dick
this
you
was
up.
back when all the continents were combined into a single supercontinent called Pangaea, and this only provided more fuel for the chain reaction. This worst ever
Now it's time
eruption
to
also
fuck you
prompted
up.
the worst ever extinction, not from the mile-thick layers of lava, but from the tons and tons of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere. The sulfur dioxide reflects sunlight, causing an extreme chilling effect on volcanic
fuck
matter, which is
his
significantly
hole.
lasts much longer than the normal.
Look at that shit.
Carbon
I got 7
dioxide
whores
is a
in his
greenhouse
ass.
gas.
I got 7
The
whores
warmer
in his
there is in
ass.
our atmosphere, the warmer we are. And the way these
He had
gases
an orgy.
disperse
He had an
globally,
orgy in his hotel room. And all 7 of my
we
whores
have
are
the same
fucking his
situation going
butt.
on right now due to industrial reasons.
His ass is
I
bloody
recently
great
flew from
raw from that
Iceland to
fuck.
Texas, and it was substantially colder here
They
than it
pulled
was
out
there.
the sheennesses.
And this
And
combination
fuck.
of atmospheric gases
Man, I
recently
fucked his
caused
butt.
climate chaos, with decades of intense episodic pulses and oscillating temperature extremes. It also changed weather systems such that normally dry deserts flash flooded and normally lush areas dried out. And this
You
was already
flaming
enough to
fucking
kill off many
slack-eyed
plant and animal
slut.
species, but this first phase of extinction due to climate chaos occurred during a period of global warming, where the average temperature rose 4 to 5 degrees centigrade above normal. And that doesn't sound like much. And the way temperatures vary
You
from
suck
day to
my
day in
dick,
any given
bitch.
location, it wouldn't be much. But we're not talking about any one location. We're talking about the average annual temperature of
Fucking
the entire
bitch.
planet. That's all
Man,
areas, both hemispheres.
All I
in
need
summer
now to
and
see
winter,
is
measured over the course of
if
a
I
week.
can get 9 whores
At that
on
scale,
someone's asshole.
any change of even a single degree
You
causes
suck
a
my
noticeable
dick,
difference.
bitch.
To put that in perspective, where you are now may be a few degrees warmer or colder
God
than
fucking
yesterday or the
damn
same
it.
day last year, and it doesn't make much difference.
God
But the last
fucking
ice age
damn it.
was a global average temperature
Holy
of only
Ghost.
4 or 5 degrees colder than it is now. That was enough for most of North America to be buried in glaciers with the sea level 120 meters lower than it is today. So degrees of annual global average are a much bigger deal than your day-to-day local weather.
Colder water can retain more gaseous molecules than warmer water. So the warmer the water is, the less oxygen it has. At the end of the Permian, there were primitive
Now be a
sharks and
dumbass
other
from
fish
that
that were as
damn
big
knot
as
right
whales,
here. Now
and they
dick that
literally
knot
drowned
up.
because they needed to get a lot more oxygen through their gills than the warmer water had left in it. Oxygen
Yeah, come
normally
on,
dissolves in the
dumbass.
surf and is dispersed by the currents at different depths according to the temperature.
God,
When there is no
fuck. I
significant
want a
difference between the
goddamn
Arctic and the
rematch.
tropics,
You
there's
goddamn
insufficient
slut from
disparity
hell.
to drive oceanic currents. Once that
You
stops, the
goddamn
water
Laura Hill from
stagnates.
hell.
And where that happens,
You
all
goddamn
oxygen
Laura
is
Hill.
lost.
You
Geologists found
goddamn Laura
pyrite in
Hill.
Lake Permian seabeds. Pyrite also
Some girl
produces
described her as a
gold,
slut
can
from
only
hell.
form in water where there is
She
no
didn't,
oxygen.
you
So
didn't
some
pay her,
areas
she
of the
gave it
ocean were
away.
completely dead, or worse, because there are bacteria that only live in oxygen-depleted water, and where some bacteria
Suck
produce
my dick,
oxygen as
bitch.
a waste product, these anaerobic bacteria produce
God
hydrogen
fucking damn
sulfide.
it.
There are stagnant bodies of water like this today that are toxic below a certain depth,
Come on, you
where the water
slut.
becomes pink and poisonous. Imagine a whole sea like that. Hydrogen sulfide can also bubble out of the water, causing clouds of toxic gas at the water's edge. And that leads to the third
Come on,
and
you
final
slut.
stage of this most cataclysmic of all mass extinctions. The release of oceanic methane displacing oxygen in the air. Right now, there is an estimated 30 trillion tons of methane hydrate frozen all over the ocean floor, and it is very sensitive to changing temperatures. Some areas of warm water have streams of methane bubbling up already, but if our oceans
Come on, you
warm by another
slut.
few degrees, all of that could be released into the atmosphere, such that vast areas would be choked with air that is flammable, but not breathable. Methane is also a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So once the oceans warmed by 5 degrees, they boiled up all that methane hydrate, which raised global temperatures by another 5 degrees, or 10 degrees overall. So imagine Arizona at 60 degrees Celsius, which is 140 Fahrenheit. So not only are all the low-lying areas death traps, but high-altitude or high-latitude temperate forests, which never get above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, would suddenly be more than 100. And Arctic regions that
Man,
should
this
never
guy's
be
starting
above
to bore
freezing
the fuck
would
out of
melt,
me.
raising the level of the mostly already dead and still deadly oceans by hundreds of feet. Imagine what our coastline...
Welcome to Genesis Apologetics. Our mission is to reveal God's truth about creation to as many
God
students as
fucking
possible.
damn it.
Students today are saturated by the world with the idea of evolution over millions of years. The Bible presents a much different history of Earth and everything in it.
God
Most
fuck
students
it.
today, even many Christian students, have no idea that the Genesis account is real history, including creation spoken into existence by God only recently. Dinosaurs living with
Man,
men,
you
and a
could have eared
catastrophic
my rug, you
worldwide flood.
dumbass.
When students understand these truths, it helps them build their lives on God's
dumb
Word,
slut.
because it's true, both theologically and historically. Our Debunking the 7 Myths program is designed for students 11th grade through college. This program addresses the 7 leading myths about Genesis, creation, and the flood that are taught in today's colleges,
Come
even
on,
some
you
Christian
slut.
colleges. Myth number 1 is, while the Bible may be inspired by God, it's not inerrant and parts of it are just myth.
Well, you have to accept that as inevitable, because God never hands down a completed work. He never showed up and gave someone a book that he wrote. Instead, every
I gotta
word
go
of all
piss.
the scriptures to any god of every religion were all written by men. So God doesn't dictate so much as he allegedly inspires through subjective interpretations of dreams or impressions of the supposed meanings of collective events or revised adaptations of elder lore. Thus, even if there is a God, if he communicates that way using a method that is inherently fraught with error and where there never can be any way to determine any verifiable accuracy, then the best you ever could expect is only a degree of truth, and even that requires an overly generous definition.
I'm back. I
of
gotta
truth.
go shit.
Some professors may also challenge the historical validity or reliability of the Bible.
Because what do the experts ever know? Well, among other things, they know for certain that the tale of Adam and Eve is just a metaphorical fable, and that the only way that story even could have any truth at all is if it's only figurative. While the fables of the Tower of Babel and Noah's Ark don't even have that. They're just folk tales, tall tales, wherein God comes out looking like a horrific and an idiotic monster with no redeeming qualities whatsoever.
Inerrancy refers to God's original word having no heirs. Why is inerrancy important? Well, the question of ultimate authority is of the highest importance to the Christian.
Whereas to the more science-minded secular skeptics, arguments from mere authority are worthless. There are no authorities. At best, there are only experts, and even they have to be able to show the truth of their convictions. If it's an important point being contested, then you should never believe what either side says just because they said so. Instead, know the reasons why that person says what they do. Know that there are reasons and compare them. And see that most other experts reviewing all of the relevant evidence are in consensus that your guy probably has a point. It's also important to admit when someone else evidently knows something better than you do.
It's not just a theological argument. You see, we can't offer the world a reliable gospel if it comes from an unreliable scripture.
And since there are no reliable authorities, then all we can rely on is evidence. That's why there are no sacred truths, and whatever is inconsistent with the facts must be discarded or corrected, whichever would be more appropriate in that case.
How can we offer the truth on any issue if we're suspicious of errors everywhere?
How can you even pretend to offer the truth at all when you can never show that there is any truth to it, ever? Not just to all of it collectively, but not even to any significant part of it either. That you just gotta make believe whatever your supposed authorities said simply because they said so, and not for any good reason beyond that, even when they're evidently, obviously, demonstrably wrong.
Airline pilots will ground their planes even with the most minor of faults, knowing that one fault can destroy confidence in the whole machine. If you pick your car up after being serviced and find out they missed something simple, wouldn't that call into question the rest of their work? The entire core message of the gospel, including sin, redemption, and forgiveness, is rooted in Genesis history.
So what you have is a house of cards built upon shifting sands, wherein the winds and the tides will both tear it down from above and below, inevitably, eventually. And your stoic refusal to admit any error will not help you.
If these core events are not true, how can we trust the theology behind them?
I should mention that out of this whole series, this one episode is particularly aimed at Christians, not unbelievers like myself. While I cannot explain how or why mainstream Christians around the world compartmentalize or justify their faith, accepting evolution and rejecting the tales of Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve, it's important to remember that most Christians worldwide are evolutionists, and that most evolutionists are Christian, especially including all those with expertise in the relevant fields of study. And that the very first foundational falsehood of creationism is the false dichotomy that one must either reject every inconvenient reality in order to make believe in a completely literal interpretation of the Bible, which is not really even possible, or one must reject every form of spirituality in order to accept what we can prove to be true about science. Understand also that fundamentalists demanding such binary extremes are, more than any other single cause, the primary reason why Christianity is in such steep decline right now, losing believers in every state and around the world in unprecedented numbers. True on that, even when they're evidently, obviously, demonstrably wrong.
Airline pilots will ground their planes even with the most minor of faults, knowing that one fault can destroy confidence in the whole machine. If you pick your car up after being serviced and find out they missed something simple, wouldn't that call into question the rest of their work? The entire core message of the gospel, including sin, redemption, and forgiveness, is rooted in Genesis history.
So what you have is a house of cards built upon shifting sands, wherein the winds and the tides will both tear it down from above and below, inevitably, eventually. And your stoic refusal to admit any error will not help you.
If these core events are not true, how can we trust the theology behind them?
I should mention that out of this whole series, this one episode is particularly aimed at Christians, not unbelievers like myself. While I cannot explain how or why mainstream Christians around the world compartmentalize or justify their faith, accepting evolution and rejecting the tales of Noah's Ark and Adam and Eve, it's important to remember that most Christians worldwide are evolutionists, and that most evolutionists are Christian, especially including all those with expertise in the relevant fields of study. And that the very first foundational falsehood of creationism is the false dichotomy that one must either reject every inconvenient reality in order to make believe in a completely literal interpretation of the Bible, which is not really even possible, or one must reject every form of spirituality in order to accept what we can prove to be true about science. Understand also that fundamentalists demanding such binary extremes are, more than any other single cause, the primary reason why Christianity is in such steep decline right now, losing believers in every state and around the world in unprecedented numbers. Such overtly dishonest ministries like Genesis Apologetics and the network of pseudoscience propaganda factories they source from are doing my work for me, making atheists at a rate faster than I can on my own, or that the entire secular science community could do collectively. And we're not even trying to necessarily make atheists, we're just trying to reason with the unreasonable. You guys are trying to convert people into make-believers, and yet you're making atheists. I'm just here pointing out that the facts contradict everything that creationists claim.
Did Jesus die for the sins of a mythical Adam who lived in a mythical garden?
That depends on the degree to which Jesus was himself mythical. We know he was at least partially so.
The Bible itself claims to be much more than myth. It claims to be God's word delivered through human authors to all humankind.
So it's just like the Torah was written by and for the Jewish faith, but then Christianity broke off of Judaism and appropriated much of their scriptures into the new religion. Just like Islam had apparently broken off from or was inspired by some faction of early Christianity and declared the Quran to be God's word delivered through human authors for all of humankind, on the excuse that both the Tanakh and the New Testament had been corrupted by the interpretations of the people
that sounds
who lived
like the
by
goddamn Mormon religion.
Passages like 2 Peter 1:21 and 2 Timothy 3:16 assure us that God himself authored the scriptures.
That's not what either of those actually says. They both say that these stories that were told by human authors were, in some uncertain sense, inspired by whatever undisclosed impressions they had about their versions or visions of God. It's like so many movies now that say how they are based on a true story. But even if they were, that doesn't mean that they are true stories anymore, because every movie got something wrong. Now, in the beginning of the movie Fargo, they did say that that was a true story, but spoiler alert, it's not. The Coen brothers lied to us about that. And it's just like there are even movies with Mel Gibson's name in the credits that could honestly say that they were inspired by true stories, or what Gibson may have thought were true stories, but they really weren't. And even when they are at least partly true, that wouldn't make his version of them true. Just look how the movie Braveheart started.
Historians from England will say I am a liar.
Psalms 119 verse 89 also makes clear that God's word is fixed or settled in heaven. Jesus confirms this by saying not even a dot on a letter will pass away from God's word until heaven and earth pass away.
Yet Christians today say that Leviticus is God's unchanging word when it says that homosexuality is an abomination. But when the same chapter says that eating shellfish or getting tattoos are abominations too, that's when they imagine Jesus saying that those laws don't apply anymore.
He also prayed to the Father, saying, "Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth."
And practically every other chapter of the Bhagavad Gita declares that it is the absolute truth. Lord Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of the Godhead and creator of the multiverse, even said so, in a book that is at least many centuries older than the Bible. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita, as well as the Vedas and Upanishads of Hinduism, and the Avestas of Zarathustra, and the Arya Granth of the Sikhs, the Book of Mormon, and the Iransha book have all been declared by some devotees to be the absolute truth and the revealed word of the one true God, just like the Bible and the Quran were said to be too. And believers of all of these say that all of the others are deceived.
Jesus also confirmed that Moses authorized the Torah, rather than it being a compilation of ancient Near East mythology.
It shows what he knew, doesn't it? Because now we have facts and evidence to show that the Torah is at least mostly based on Mesopotamian mythology, along with the elements of Zoroastrianism and a few lesser influences. But not only do we still not have any evidence that Moses ever existed, and no time period into which he would fit, along with the stories associated with him, we actually have evidence that he didn't exist. That the character of Moses is a compilation of a handful of other people who lived centuries earlier. But of course, there's no way Jesus would have known that.
Jesus referred to the Old Testament over 40 times, and every time he treated it as real history, including creation, the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, Jonah and the fish, and the account of Cain and Abel.
That's because in most cultures back then, and in some still today, you kind of have to communicate some ideas through familiar folklore. It's a cultural communication, regardless whether that folklore is considered to be historical or fictional. Sometimes that doesn't matter. For example, we can say that Luke Skywalker didn't know that the girl he just kissed was his sister, and we can use that reference to make a point about the value of getting to know someone a little better first without having to even discuss whether Luke and Leia really existed, because that doesn't matter to the point being made. Now, a good bit of this is well outside of my wheelhouse, so whenever I can, I like to turn to people that I esteem to be experts in various things if they know a little bit more than I do. And in this case, my friend Lawrence Yufa had intently studied the Bible as an autodidact for years before I convinced him to go back to college, where he's now spent years learning Koine and all kinds of Greek in his serious pursuit of scholarship that he has, I think, already earned. So, Lawrence, can you give the audience some introduction to yourself and your background, if you would, please?
All right. Aaron, thank you for having me. I grew up Jewish, but I wasn't like a super religious Jew. I was mostly just going with the flow. I did eventually leave Judaism when I was around 13, and I joined that very, very toxic.
Today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Gloria Mark, who's the Chancellor's Professor at the University of California, Irvine. She's studied attention and stress in the digital age for over 2 decades and is also author of the forthcoming book out on Tuesday, January 10th, Attention Span, a groundbreaking way to restore balance, happiness, and productivity. You can find out more about it at gloriamark.com. Really great having you on. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
So it's almost become cliche now to repeat some of the things that have been written many times. So it's almost become cliche to talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
So the reality of what's going on.
My job, besides working in New York City at a medical school, I also consult for the government in terms of recommendation of certain drugs. So I got interested in clinical trials. And when you do clinical trials, one of the issues that comes up is placebo. So I wanted to talk about that because it's not really obvious. The term placebo comes from the 14th century, I shall please. It was used at people chanting at Catholic Vespers for the dead. These were paid mourners, and they would chant placebo, placebo, placebo. And that's what it meant initially. But Hooper's Medical Dictionary in 1811 said that placebo was something that doctors did to please the patient rather than to benefit them. And then Henry Beecher in 1955, for the first time, showed that there was actually physiological effects of placebo. They weren't just nothing. They actually changed physiology. Now, these are standards of care, so you have to understand how you generally treat things. This is from 1921, the London Pharmacopoeia, and this was used for centuries. So these were well-accepted treatments. What are they? Eusnia, which is moss from the skull of victims of violent death. Vigo's plaster, which is viper's flesh, live frogs and worms. And Gascoigne's powder, which is bezoar, like hairballs. Ember, pearls, crab's eyes, coral, black tops of crab claws. This was a standard of medical care in 1921 through much of the world, particularly in Europe. Now, when you think of placebo,